Yo, what is up, everybody? It's your boy Ceresco, back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled The Wishing Well, written by Craig Roshek. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to them, like, comment, and subscribe. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the trees on Harold's rural property. It was an evening like any other, the kind Harold had grown accustomed to since his wife, Henrietta, passed away 12 years ago. These walks had become a routine, a way to fill the silence that now defined his life. The air was cool, the woods quiet. Too quiet, Harold thought. The birds had stopped singing, and even the wind seemed to have died down, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. He shook off the unease creeping into his thoughts and pressed on, following the familiar path that wound deeper to the forest. That's when the fog rolled in. It came fast, thick and white, swallowing the trees and the path in a matter of moments. Harold stopped, squinting into the haze. He had never seen fog like this before. Not here, not anywhere. It was so dense that he couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. A cold knot of unease settled in his gut, but he brushed it aside. Fog was just fog after all. He kept walking, slower now, his steps more cautious. But as quickly as it had appeared, the fog began to lift. Harold blinked, disoriented. The path was still there, the trees still looming overhead. But something was different. A clearing had appeared where there hadn't been one before. In the center of that stood a well. Harold stopped in his tracks. The well was old, made of crumbling bricks, with a rusty pulley system and a frayed rope hanging down to the darkness below. He knew this forest like the back of his hand, and he was certain there had never been a well here. It didn't make any sense. He approached it cautiously, his instincts screaming, turn back. But his curiosity got the better of him. Peering over the edge, he saw nothing but blackness. There was no water, no bottom, just an empty void. The air around the well was cool, almost cold, and Harold felt a shiver run down his spine. Something about the well felt wrong. But instead of leaving, he found himself reaching for the rope. The fibers were rough against his skin, and the pulley squealed loudly as he began to lower the bucket. The sound grated on his nerves, but he kept going until he heard the bucket hit the bottom with a dull thud. It was dry, no splash of water, no echo from the depths. Harold frowned. He began pulling the bucket back up, expecting to find it empty. Instead, there was a scrap of paper inside, along with a small, wore-down pencil. He unfolded the paper, his hands shaking slightly, and read the single line scrawled across in jagged, uneven handwriting. What do you want most in this world? Harold stared at the words, his mind racing. Was this some kind of joke? It had to be, but who will play a joke like this out here in the middle of nowhere? He glanced around, but there was no one. Just the trees, fading light, and the well. His heart ached as he thought of Henrietta. It had been 12 years, but the pain of losing her hadn't dulled. If anything, it had only grown sharper with time. He missed her more than words could express. Without really thinking about it, Harold flipped the paper over and wrote his answer on the back. I want to see my wife again. The pencil felt heavy in his hand, the words even more so. What was he doing? This was ridiculous. And yet, there was a part of him, a small, desperate part, that clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, something would happen. He put the note back in the bucket and lowered it to the well. The rope slipped through his fingers. Halfway down, the bucket dropped suddenly, the rope going slack. Harold's heart skipped a beat. Had he broken it? But the tension returned, and he pulled the bucket back up. When it emerged from the darkness, Harold's breath caught in its throat. Next to his own words, a single response had been added, hastily scrawled in the same jagged script. Tonight. He stared at the note, his mind struggling to process what it meant. Tonight? Was this some kind of sick joke? But who could have done this? And how? A cold fear began to creep over him. The woods, once so familiar, now felt foreign, even hostile. The air seemed colder, the shadows darker. His hands shook as he folded the note and shoved it to his pocket. He didn't know what he had done, but he knew it was something he shouldn't have. The walk back to his house felt longer than usual. The trees pressing in on him from all sides. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, following him through the woods. When he finally reached his front door, he nearly was out of breath, though he hadn't been walking any faster than usual. Inside, the house was as quiet as ever. He lit a fire in the fireplace, trying to chase away the chill that had settled to his bones. But he couldn't get warm, no matter how close he sat to the flames. He kept thinking about the note, the word tonight echoing in his mind. Harold sat in his favorite chair, a photo of Henrietta on the table side. He stared at it, his heart heavy with longing and fear. What had he done? What's going to happen tonight? As the hours ticked by, the fire burned down to embers, and Harold's eyelids grew heavy. He fought to stay awake, but the exhaustion finally claimed him, and he drifted off to sleep, the note still clutched in his hand. It was the knocking that woke him, sharp and insistent. Harold jerked awake, disoriented, fire nearly out. He frowned, trying to shake off the lingering fog of sleep. Who will be knocking at this hour? He checked the clock, 3 a.m. The knocking came again, this time, and Harold's heart began to race. He stood up slowly, his joints protesting, and moved toward the door. As he approached, he saw a shadow through the frosted glass, a figure standing just outside. A figure that matched Henrietta's height. Harold froze, his breath catching in his throat. He looked down and saw, through the gap under his door, a pair of shoes. Henrietta's shoes. The one she was buried in. Panic surged through him. This wasn't right. This was not natural. The knocking grew more insistent, and then he heard a voice. A voice that was unmistakably Henrietta's, but wrong somehow. The words were short, stilted, and forced through what sounded like cracked, dry lips. Harold, open the door. Harold's blood ran cold. He backed away from the door, his mind racing. He wanted to see her again, but not like this. Not like this. He had to get out now. Moving as quickly as his old legs would allow, Harold made his way to the back of the house, through the kitchen and down into the cellar. His hands trembled as he fumbled with the latch on the cellar door. Finally forcing it open and stepping out to the cold night air. From the shadows, he could see the front of the house, the figure still standing at the door. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to get a better look. For what he saw filled him with horror. It was Henrietta, or what was left of her. Her skin was pale and stiff, with the unmistakable sheen of embalming fluid. Her movements were jerky, unnatural, as if she were a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Her eyes, oh, those beautiful eyes that he loved so much, were gone, replaced by dark, hollow sockets. Harold's stomach turned. This wasn't his wife. It was something else. Something that had taken her place, using her body like a grotesque mask. He needed to get away, but as he turned to flee, his foot caught on a coil of rope left lying on the ground, and he fell hard, pain shooting up his leg as his ankle twisted beneath him. He bit back a cry of pain, but it was too late. The figure had heard him. It turned, its head jerking unnaturally in its direction, and began to move toward Harold. its stiff limbs creaking with every step. Harold, why are you running? The voice was closer now. The panic that had been simmering in Harold's chest finally boiled over. He scrambled to his feet, pain be damned, and hobbled fast as he could toward his truck. But when he reached it, he realized with a sinking feeling that his keys were still inside the house, right where the thing that used to be his wife was now standing. His breath came in short, panic gasped as he backed away from the truck, knowing he had no choice but to run. The figure, Henrietta's corpse, was moving faster now, a low, guttural cry escaping its throat. Harold turned, fled into the woods, his twisted ankle throbbing with every step. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to get away. And as he limped through the darkened forest, the well's presence loomed in his mind. It had caused this. Maybe it could stop it too. Harold pushed through the underbush, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Every step sent a sharp pain shooting from up twisted ankle. But he didn't dare slow down. The woods, once familiar and comforting, now felt alien, the shadows deeper and more menacing. And behind him he could hear the relentless pursuit. Henrietta, or what was left of her, rustling through the trees, her stiff jerky movements growing louder as she closed the distance between them. He needed to reach the well. It was the only thing that might offer a way out of this nightmare. The idea of returning to that cursed well filled him with dread. But desperation fueled his steps. If the well had brought Henrietta back, maybe it could undo the horror he had unleashed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Harold stumbled to the clearing. The well stood there, ancient and foreboding, its dark mouth gaping open like an entrance to the underworld. Harold's breath came in panic as he approached, his body trembling with fear and exhaustion. The bucket was already on its way up, the rope moving as if pulled by unseen hands. Harold's heart pounded in his chest as he grabbed the rope, helping it along. Through his hands were slick with sweat. And when the bucket emerged from the darkness, Harold's stomach churned with dread, because inside was another note, rolled tightly like a scroll, with a small match tied to it. And his hand shook as he took the note and unrolled it. The words inside were simple, but they sent a chill down his spine. Are you satisfied? Harold's mind raced. Satisfied? With what? The abomination that had once been his beloved wife? A grotesque parody of life that now stalked him through the woods? His heart clenched with regret as he thought of how much he missed Henrietta, and how much he wished he had never answered that first note. This was not what he wanted. This was a nightmare. He flipped the note over, and with a worn down pencil stub still in the bucket, scribbled a frantic reply. No, stop it. He placed the note back in the bucket and lowered it into the well, the pulling squealing as it descended. The sound of Henrietta's movements in the woods grew louder, closer, and Harold's heart raced. The bucket hit the bottom of the well, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then slowly, the rope began to move again, the bucket climbing back up toward him. When he reached to the top, Harold pulled it up with trembling hands. He grabbed the note, his pulse pounding in his ears, and unrolled it. His breath caught in his throat as he read the single word written there. No. Panic surged through him. No? The well was refusing to do what he asked? He looked around, the darkness pressing in on him. The rustling of the trees grew louder as Henrietta drew nearer. He was out of time. In desperation, Harold scribbled one final plea on the back of the note. Please stop it, as he moved to place the note back in the bucket. The pulley suddenly snapped with a loud crack. The bucket tumbled into the well, disappearing to the darkness below with a final echoing crash. Harold stared in horror at the frayed rope, his last hope unraveling before his eyes. The well was broken, the bucket gone. He couldn't send the note back, couldn't plead for mercy. He was trapped with the thing that had once been his wife closing in. He leaned over the edge of the well and, unsure what else to do, dropped the note into the abyss. He watched as it fluttered down, disappearing into the darkness. Harold's heart pounded in his chest. He strained to listen, hoping, praying that something would happen. But instead of silence, Harold heard something else. A sound that chilled him to the bone. Something climbing up the walls of the well, its claws scraping against the bricks. The noise was wet and sickening, like nails on a chalkboard, mixed with the sound of tearing flesh. Harold stumbled back from the edge, his breath coming in short, panic bursts. His mind screaming at him to run, but his body was frozen in place, paralyzed by the sheer terror of what he knew was coming. Then, slowly, a gnarled, clawed hand reached over the edge of the well. It was covered in blood, and the skin ragged, torn. A second hand followed, gripping the stones with sickening strength. Harold's mouth went dry as he watched, too horrified to move. The message was written in blood, not lead, and it was clear direct, and final. Join me. Harold's knees buckled, and he nearly collapsed under the weight of the words. His eyes flicked back to the well, but the hands were gone, leaving nothing but the cold, dark void. The sound behind him made his blood run cold. The rustling had stopped and replaced by the slow, deliberate footsteps of his wife's corpse as it drew closer. Harold's heart pounded in his chest, the word join echoing in his mind like a death sentence. He looked at the well, at the note still clutched in his hand. The only way to escape the horror that was approaching, to stop the nightmare, was to follow the well's command. But how could he? How could he willingly throw himself into that abyss, knowing it would be the end? But then again, what choice did he have? Henrietta was nearly upon him, reeking of decay, her empty eye sockets fixed on him, as if she could still see. Harold could feel the cold, dead breath of his wife on his neck, hear the creak of her joints as she reached out for him. Out of options, Harold climbed onto the edge of the well, his body trembling with fear and pain. The cold stone bit into his hands as he balanced precariously, legs dangling over the edge, looking down to the darkness below. He didn't want to die, but he didn't want to face whatever was coming for him either. His mind raced, searching for any other solution, any way out. But there was nothing. Nothing but the well, the darkness, and the hands that had written those final, damning words. As Henrietta's corpse reached for him, her stiff cold fingers brushing against his skin, Harold made his decision. Closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let go. For a brief moment, he felt weightless, the wind rushing past him as he fell into the abyss. But then the impact came hard, fast, his body slamming into the sides of the well as he tumbled down. He felt bones break, skin tear, and then the cold, hard bottom met him with a final, thickening crunch. Pain exploded through his body, his limbs twisting at awkward angles as he landed on the shattered remains bucket. Pieces of wood embedded themselves in his flesh, and for a moment, he was sure he was dead. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Harold found himself still conscious, breathing with great difficulty, lying in a cramped cold space at the bottom of the well. He tried to move, but every part of his body screamed in protest. He was alive, but barely. Before his eyes could adjust to the darkness, he heard it. A soft rustling like paper brushing against the brick walls as it descended to the well. The sound grew louder, closer, until a rolled up note struck him gently on the shoulder and fell beside him. Tied to it was a single match. Harold's hand shook as he reached for the match, striking it against a rough stone. The tiny flame flared to life, casting flickering shadows on the cold, damp walls. With trembling fingers, he unrolled the note and squinted at the words written there. On one side, in the same jagged script as before, was a question that had started this nightmare. What do you want most in this world? For a brief moment, hope flickered in Harold's chest. Was this another chance? One last opportunity to change his wish? To alter his fate? He looked around frantically, searching for something to write with. But the well offered nothing. No pencil, no lead, nothing at all. He scrambled at the bottom of the well, his hands searching desperately for the nub of the pencil he had used before, but came up empty. Panic welled up inside him as he realized he couldn't change his wish. He was trapped. As the match burned lower, threatening to scorch his fingertips, Harold's eyes caught sight of something written on the opposite side of the note, in a handwriting he all knew too well. It was Henrietta's, the loops and swirls unmistakable, though the letters were jagged, almost illegible, as if penned by stiff, numb fingers. She had written a single word in response to the question of what she wanted most in the world. Harold. Just then, what little remained of his match burned out, plunging him back to darkness, and a wave of primal terror washed over him as he heard the sound he dreaded the most. The slow, deliberate scraping of another body clambering down the walls of the well. Stiff and doll-like in its movements, Henrietta was coming for him. The sound grew louder, closer, as if the very walls of the well were closing in on him. Harold's heart pounded in his chest, his mind screaming at him to escape. But there was nowhere to go. The darkness pressed in from all sides, suffocating him as he heard his wife's stiff, cold limbs scraping closer. Harold could do nothing but listen to the relentless approach to Henrietta's corpse. Her movements slow but deliberate.
Harold.
She rasped one final time, her voice a twisted mockery of a woman he had loved. Then, with one final sickening thud, everything went still. For a moment, in spite of his pain, Harold sat in silence, paralyzed with fear. After what felt like an eternity had passed, and just as he mustered the courage to so much as draw another breath, a bony hand shot out of the darkness, wrapping itself around his neck. and Harold screamed and screamed. Above, the fog began to rise once more, thick and impenetrable. When it later faded, as quickly and as naturally as it had arrived, the well had vanished with it. The only indication that the chasm or Harold had ever been there was a single scrap of paper lying discarded, carried lazily about by a passing breeze. As it tossed and turned in the gentle wind, a single line of jagged, uneven handwriting at times became visible, passing what appeared to be a harmless question. What do you want most in this world? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of. Yo, what is up, everybody? Your boy Ceresco, back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one titled "The Girl in the Wall," written by P.D. Williams. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to them, like, comment, and subscribe. Donnie, when are we gonna stop? I'm tired and I need a pee. Shannon and Donnie, her sometimes boyfriend, had been driving for hours. They'd left Georgia for Arizona 2 days earlier and still had a ways to go. The trip was more of a desperate escape than a journey towards new adventures. Donnie was deep in debt to the wrong people, and losing his job hadn't helped. It had been rough going for a while until he learned that hope and hard work were no match for dumb, blind luck. He talked to a cousin who had a friend that might have some construction work in Scottsdale. Donnie had nothing to lose except the thumb that his bookie, Ramon, threatened to take in place of his gambling debts. He hoped that a change of scenery and a fresh start might do him some good and save him some appendages. So, Donnie packed a few of his favorite belongings, such as Shannon, and hit the road. He prayed that the iffy motor in his worn-out 2010 Ford Mustang would last the distance. He hoped Shannon would as well. 12 hours in, Shannon needed a break, if only to have somewhere to throw up. She was sick from the exhaust fumes leaking up through the filthy floorboard and regretted a 36-ounce bladder soda he'd gulped down around hour 10. Seriously, Donnie, I need to stop somewhere. Alright, fine. We'll stop at the next motel. That make you happy? Yep, that, a commode, a nice long shower. No sooner had she spoken than they approached an exit on the interstate. A sun-bleached road sign displayed icons indicating that a bar, gas station, and a motel were within a couple of miles. Donnie followed that long, winding off-ramp to an empty stretch of 2-lane road marked Highway 21. A sign posted at the confluence showed the motel was located 1.5 miles down on the left. Everything else was to the right. Donnie headed toward the motel and glanced at the odometer to mark the distance. As he drove, a horrid stench blew in through the air vents. It reminded him of untreated sewage. Shannon crinkled her nose.
Oh man, the world is that?
I don't know, probably a bog or a pig farm nearby. Too quiet out here. I'm gonna find something on the radio. Great. We're so far out the boonies, you can't pick up anything. Look, just grab one of the CDs and pop it in. If I have to listen to any more Jason Aldean or Foo Fighters, I'm gonna jump out and walk. Alright, bud. Don't whine about how quiet it is. Resentment lingered as they continued along the desolate highway. The road was dark, no streetlights, houses, or passing vehicles. Donnie strained his eyes against the night, unable to see beyond the reach of the headlights as creeping shadows swallowed their dim rays. A thick tangle of trees and tall grass closed in on either side. As they pushed on, a ghostly carpet of white mist rolled over the asphalt as if to welcome them. I don't like this. It's creepy. Hey, you're the one who needs to pop a squat and get some sleep. Want me to turn around and look for someplace else? No. I can hold a little longer. Didn't we be there by now? The sign said it was only a mile and a half. Donnie checked the car's odometer. What's up? The odometer says we should have been there 5 miles ago. Well, I didn't see anything with lights on. That sign's probably wrong. Just keep driving. I'll tell you when I see something. Several minutes later, they still hadn't reached the motel. Alright, that's it. I'm turning around. As he looked for a place to make a U-turn, he saw a glowing light in the distance. As they got closer, he could make out a block of bright letters levitating in the soupy night air. Is that a motel sign? Oh, I think that's it. Thank God. My back teeth are drowning. Donnie slowed and turned into the motel's parking lot. Fissures snaked across the ragged asphalt, whole chunks missing like rotted out teeth. The motel was a drab, one-story brick building, a neon sign above the door, a small office. Some of its letters were dead and gone, but enough of them remained to let Donnie and Shannon know they'd be spending the night at the Miller's Motel. Donnie eased the Mustang into one of the parking spaces nearest the door. He was about to kill the engine when something dark ran past the side of the car. Yo, you see that? See what? Donnie turned off the motor. Look, stay here for a second. I want to check this place out. He got out and looked around the vacant lot. The air was hot and stale, abandoned by the wind. The fetid odor from earlier was stronger here. Although he didn't see anything unusual, the eeriness of the scene disquieted him. It reminded him of the feeling he got when he boarded up an empty elevator and a stranger stepped inside at the last minute. Hey Donnie, everything okay? Yeah, it's all good. Just a little white line fever. Come on, let's get checked in. Shannon got out and took a few steps before stopping. Whoa, this joint looks like something out of a slasher movie. I wasn't worn out. I'd pee behind a bush and keep moving till we found a Holiday Inn. Relax. Ain't nothing gonna grab you. As soon as they entered the cramped lobby, a sour scent of stale mop water and lemon air freshener encompassed them. One of the two fluorescent tubes inside the overhead light fixture flickered, creating a strobing effect. No one was manning the small Formica counter that served as a front desk. There was a closed wooden door a few feet behind it. Hello? Anybody back there? We got customers up front. Just a minute, please. Be right with you. The door opened, and a short, chubby man in a white dress shirt appeared. The sweat-yellowed fabric worked in tandem with the overburdened buttons to restrain an overflowing belly. A plastic pocket badge with Leonard imprinted on it complemented the seedy ensemble. What it'll be, friends? Donnie and Shannon took a step back to get out of the range of the clerk's body odor. A nauseous mix of armpits and halitosis. We'd like a room for the night. Alright, I think we can manage that. Placing it on the counter, he flipped through some dog-eared pages until he came to a blank one. He spun the binder around to face Donnie. Alright, just put your name and phone number so I can reach you at the top of the line. You're kinda old school, ain't you? Don't you got a computer, internet access? Nah, no service this far out. We don't see a whole lot of business, just occasional one-nighters, just like you two. Yeah, I figured that much looking at your parking lot. So, what do I owe you? I don't know, whatever you think is fair. Seriously? Look, the owner doesn't always come around and you two look dog tired. How about we do $20? Sound about right? Sold, declared Shannon. Donnie laid a bill on the counter as Leonard retrieved the key from the hook on the wall. Here you go, room 11. Let me know if you need anything else. I'm Leonard, and I'll be here all night. Look, when you go out, hang left, numbers on the door. Shannon thanked Leonard, and she and Donnie headed for the room. Along the way, they swatted through swarms of moths orbiting around the bare light bulbs on the side of each door. When they got to the room, they rushed inside before the squadron of insects joined them. An unpleasant smell greeted them. Dark, dank, and pungent. A stink of pot and sex lingering from previous occupants. The gaudy room looked like it hadn't been remodeled for a very long time. The furniture was worn, old, and cheap. Grimy shag carpeting accentuated fading, peeling wallpaper. Donnie flipped a sticky light switch and a lamp sniped down. So, this is what $20 room looks like. Donnie surveyed the squalid accommodations and shook his head. Don't you have to pee or something? You better know it, cowboy. And Shannon made a beeline to the bathroom. Donnie pulled back the tacky covers on the queen-size bed, exposing a dingy, threadbare sheet. Though a bit road-weary, he felt a pulsing in his loins. There was something about being with Shannon in a cheap motel room. Stripped off to his boxers, climbed under the covers, and waited for her to return. The bathroom door swung open, and Shannon walked out. She stopped and looked at Donnie lying in bed, a look of hope plastered across his grinning face. You're kidding, right? Oh, come on, babe. We can mess around and then grab a hot shower together. Speaking of grabbing, he flipped down her side of the covers and patted the mattress. Donnie, told you I was tired. Look, I'm gonna go get my bag out of the car, come back, and wash off. Then I'm going to sleep. Understand? Fine then. You do what you want. I'm taking off. What? Where are you going? I know good and well you ain't gonna leave me here with this $20 outhouse by myself. I'm gonna go find a bar. You take your stupid shower. I'll have some fun with or without you tonight. He fished his car keys out of his jean pocket and stormed from the room, slamming the door behind him. Shannon didn't think he'd actually leave. When she heard the Mustang's engine revving, she panicked. The thought of being alone at the isolated motel filled her with dread. He ran from the room and headed for the parking lot. Shannon arrived in time to see the red taillights of the car peering back at her like two devilish eyes. Donnie Jackson, don't you leave me here. Donnie, you're a dead man. As Shannon sulked in the now empty parking lot, she noticed a large shadow forming on the edge of the woods across the street. It floated across the parking lot like an ominous cloud. Suddenly, all the night sounds ceased. In the quiet, Shannon thought she heard breathing. She spun around, expecting to see that creepy desk clerk behind her. But there was no one. As the shadow passed in front of the lone streetlight at the entrance of the motel, the light dimmed. Shannon furrowed her brow. The temperature dropped noticeably. She could see her own breath. Ugh, enough of this mess. And Shannon trotted back to her room. She locked the deadbolt, then closed the room's thick curtains. She looked through the door's peephole. Geez, how'd it get so cold? She wondered if her uneasiness about being stranded was playing tricks on her mind. It's probably just a cold front. Still, she couldn't deny that something felt different. Threatening. The mist was so weird. She waited, half expecting a knock, or seeing the mist wafting under the door, invading her lungs and filling them with dry black dust. Keep it together, girl. Come on. You're way overthinking this. After several minutes, nothing happened. She inched her way to the window and peeked through the slit between the curtains. There was nothing outside, just a parking lot. She allowed herself to relax a bit. I need a drink, but a hot shower will have to do. Shannon was about to look around the room for her toiletries bag when she realized they had accompanied Donnie to the bar. Oh, thanks, jackass. She made a silent vow never to let him see her naked ever again. Shannon removed her cell phone from her back pocket and tried calling him. But, as Leonard had said, there was no reception. Oh, well, that's just great. Guess I'll just have to make the best of this dung heap. Shannon looked at the ancient tube television sitting on the dresser, wondering if it still worked. It didn't. Oh, this sucks. She plopped on the bed and stared at the brown water stain on the ceiling. It kind of looks like a cross between a bird and a star. That or a plop of poop. She amused herself by attempting to figure out what the pattern reminded her of, as though she was taking a discount Rorschach test. She heard a thump in the wall. Oh, must be mice. She heard it again. Hello? Hello? The voice was faint, like a whisper in the air. Shannon sat up. The knocking continued, and it traveled from the bathroom. Shannon shivered. The mist, the cold, the curious tapping, the disembodied voice made her apprehensive. Easy, girl. Let's go in there, get to the bottom of this. She slid carefully off the bed and stood motionless, concentrating. Hello? Shannon was hoping there'd be no response. She could chalk everything up, frazzled nerves. Hearing nothing, she remained still, quieting her breath. The profound absence of sound made her think of being underwater. Seconds ticked by. She heard it again, and she tensed. The dull rapping emanated from the other side of the wall. She tiptoed closer, and a muffled, childlike voice penetrated the sheetrock barrier. Can you hear me? Please say yes. Shannon chuckled. Oh my gosh, it's only a little girl. Did you say something? Shannon considered whether she wanted to start a conversation with the mysterious child. What might the little girl's parents think if they caught her communicating with a stranger? Oh, bless her heart. She's probably lonesome and bored. Alright, just keep it short. What's your name, sugar? I'm Melissa. Who are you? Well, hi, Melissa. My name's Shannon. I guess you're our new next door neighbor. I didn't hear y'all pull in. When did you get here? A while back. Really? Well, we just got here. Was the weather acting up when you arrived? It was doing something freaky earlier. I don't remember. Can you keep me company? Shannon hesitated. Now that she'd satisfied her curiosity, she didn't want to get hooked into a long conversation. I'd like to, honey, but I'm getting ready for bed. Nice talking to you, though. The child said nothing more. Shannon assumed that she either had gotten bored or feared her parents busting her. Shannon went back to the front room and lay down on the bed again. She closed her eyes, allowing the stillness to relax her. All of a sudden, she hears loud booming. Shannon popped up. She took a moment to catch her breath. Who's watching that brat? She hears it again. Alright, that's it. I've had enough crap thrown at me tonight. Hey, why don't you people watch your stupid kid? I'm trying to rest over here. Her outburst drew no reaction. Yeah, you better keep it down. All of a sudden, she hears growling that's coming from Shannon's hollow belly. I wonder if there's a vending machine around this dump. Shannon felt around in her front pocket and found a couple of dollars. With some effort, she managed to push aside the earlier weirdness in the parking lot. Releasing a heavy breath, she said, "All right, here we go," and headed to the door. She stopped halfway when she heard a child crying. Shannon followed the sound to the bathroom wall. It wasn't pained or, what do you mean, can't watch TV, or to cry. It sounded mournful, frightened. Her annoyance turned to genuine concern. Melissa, is that you, sweetie? Melissa, are you okay? Please, don't hurt me. Who's she talking to? Was that child in danger? She pressed her ear against the wall. Soundlessness filled the space within. Help! Shannon! Help! Shannon jumped back. She had no idea what the situation was next door. Can't even call 911. No! Don't do it! Something smashed against the wall, and Melissa wailed louder. Shannon's instincts kicked in. I'm coming, Melissa. Shannon then bolted from her room, ran next door, and began banging on the door of room 10. Melissa was screaming. Somebody was tossing furniture. Hey, leave that kid alone. Suddenly, a blanket of quiet dropped. Shannon kicked the door. You better open this door or I'll knock it down. She expected more yelling, but none came. It was as if someone had hit the stop button on the recording. Shannon was shaking with anger, panting from exertion. What in the Sam hell is happening here? She tried peeking in the window, but couldn't see around the heavy curtains. No light bred through the narrow opening. She heard only cricket songs and the soft fluttering of moth wings. She turned to the parking lot and realized no other car was there. Her neck tingled. She wanted to get back inside quickly to feel the comfort of light. After securing the door, Shannon sat down at the round wobbly table under the window to think. I don't like this. Thanks, Donnie. As angry as she was at him for abandoning her for the sake of his entertainment, she couldn't remember a time she wanted to see him more. Shannon? Are you still there? Cold swept over her. Don't answer her. Don't answer her. Just ignore her and maybe she'll go away. I think he just left. Please, I need you. Look, wherever you are, this ain't funny no more. Leave me alone and I'll call the cops. Or at least I would, if the stupid phone worked. But he's coming back. There was genuine fear in the girl's voice. Shannon wondered if she might be dealing with child abduction despite the strange happenings. Or given her anxious state of mind, if there was a little girl at all. She couldn't be sure. I think I'd rather be dealing with ghosts. But her conscience wouldn't let her rest. Shannon went into the bathroom and stood at the wall. Melissa, who's coming? The scary man. I don't want to be here anymore. Please, help me get out. Is there any way out of there? No, I'm locked in and there's no light. She bit her bottom lip. You could use a chair to break open the wall and free the captive girl. But what if the man was still there? Okay, Melissa, I'm going for help. You need to be very quiet. I'll be back soon. But I'm scared of the dark. I need some kind of light. Shannon licked her dry lips. She knew she needed to bring help, but she hated the idea of leaving Melissa alone, crying in the black room. Shannon, are you there? Oh, he's probably close. Please hurry. I'm thinking. Oh, I have an idea. What if I dig a little hole on my side of the wall while you dig one on yours? That way we could meet in the middle. Then I can share your light. Shannon considered Melissa's plan. It might give the frightened child some comfort while she went for help. Honey, is there anything there you can dig with? I don't know. I can't see anything. Look, just feel around. I'll look for something over here. Melissa, did you find anything? No. Did you? No. Then the thought came to her. She scraped the decrepit wall and a wisp of white dust floated around her fingertip. Okay, look, sheetrock is old and thin, so we might be able to dig out with our fingernails. I'm gonna scratch on my wall. When you hear it, follow the sound and start digging. Okay? You ready to listen? She scratched the sheetrock at the height she thought the little girl might be able to reach. She paused to check on Melissa. Did you hear that? It's about 4 feet from the floor. Yeah, I heard you. I know where you are now. I'll start digging. Here I go. Shannon began chipping away at the drywall. As she's expected, the sheetrock was brittle, so she had little trouble breaking through. She poked her index finger into the hole and wiggled it around so Melissa could better locate her. "Melissa, feel around for my finger." The child said nothing. "Sweetie, did you hear me? Feel around for my finger." "Shannon?" "Yeah, darling." "He's here." Something grabbed Shannon's finger and yanked it with enough force to dislocate it from her knuckle. The pain was immediate. She jerked her disconnected finger back, but its hold was too strong and made her skin stretch like a rubber band. There was a loud crunch as the digit's middle joint snapped upward. Shannon howled. "You leave her alone," yelled Melissa. The attacker applied a tighter grip to Shannon's L-shaped finger, tugged the rest of her hand further into the wall. "Let me go." "I'm sorry, Shannon, I can't make it stop." Shannon realized that if she was going to have any chance of rescuing Melissa and herself, she'd have to act quickly. Using her good hand, she punched a hole in the weakened wall, then grabbed her attacker's arm. "Run, baby, run!" Another large hand seized Shannon's arm and began squeezing, its sharp nails puncturing her skin. She thrashed around like an animal in a trap. The needle-like pain in her arm grew as the fingers clawed deeper into her stinging flesh. She wailed when the hand fully penetrated her arm, taking hold of the bone underneath. Shannon grunted as mind-twisting terror hammered at her. She put her foot against the wall for leverage and readied herself for the explosion of agony that was to come. As she pushed away from the wall, her arm made low snapping sounds. Her nerve endings were on fire. Screams burned from her vocal cords. Suddenly, the grip relaxed. Shannon flew backward and crashed against the opposite wall, nipping her tongue, the tang of blood culling it. She dropped to the floor and forced herself to assess the damage. Her arm looked like someone had filleted with a dull knife. The bone in the middle joint of her index finger had ripped through the skin. A flood of thick crimson poured from the wound in an open tap. Small white dots formed her vision. She tried crawling from the bathroom, but her shredded arms' blood and ripped tendons made her slip. Cracking sound suddenly made, and the wall split from the holes down to the floor and pulsed outward. A tall, cadaverous figure in a tattered black suit pushed through the crevice like a malformed baby. The spindly horror had no eyes, just deep black holes, weeping maggots. Its nose had two horizontal slits from which a syrupy discharge oozed. With its drooping skin and long gaping mouth, it looked like a caricature of a screaming corpse. It turned and lowered its bald head toward Shannon. "Come with me," Shannon's deafening shrieks reverberated in the blood-splattered room. Shock overtook her ruined body, masking the pain. With the torment temporarily at bay, she tried crawling with her useless arm again. The thing laughed, deep and gravelly. It grabbed Shannon by her ankles and pulled her toward the opening. She dug the fingernails of her crippled hand into the tile. Her finger turned around in the opposite direction as the nails from the remaining fingers snapped in half. Shannon went into shock. Mama? Mama? Mama, he mumbled. The thing drew back its head and screamed, a cacophony of terrifying sounds rushing from its throat. The labored breaths of the otherworldly fog, the ghostly whispers of the terrified girl, and every horrified victim before her were captured in his unearthly shrieks. It dragged Shannon's raw body over the hole's jagged shards, plummeting her into the world of shadows beyond the wall. Suddenly, we hear the phone on the counter. It rang only once before Leonard answered it. He never kept it waiting. He drew the receiver to his ear. It's done. Come. Leonard shook. He'd never gotten used to its haunting hiss. He allowed his nerves to settle before going into the closet and grabbing the mop bucket and rags and headed to the room where the mess would be waiting. A few hours later, Donnie swerved into the parking spot outside room 11. Wobbly and reeking of whiskey, he jabbed around the door lock with the key. Getting lucky on the fourth attempt, he unlocked the door and staggered to the room. Only the cheap lamp of the water-ringed bedside table illuminated it. Shannon wasn't in the bedroom. Donnie glanced at the partially closed bathroom door. Babe? You in there? He didn't answer. Seeing the light peeking around the jamb, Donnie figured he still might have a chance to make things right until he screwed up again. Darling? Come on, Shannon. Don't be like that. I just need to get away for a while. Donnie opened the door and looked inside. He groaned at the empty bathroom. Where could she have gone? She didn't have a car. Maybe Leonard had seen her go. Donnie was near the front door when he heard the sound. Donnie? Donnie? Shannon? That you, sugar? Donnie. How the hell I miss her? Donnie returned to the bathroom, looked behind the shower curtain, and found it was empty. Where you at, babe? Donnie, I need you. The muffled voice was coming from the other side of the wall. He went over and leaned his ear close to it. Shannon, what are you doing next door? When she didn't answer, he pounded on the wall. Shannon, quit fooling around and get back over here. Look, I'm sorry I left you to go drinking. Donnie? can you hear me? Barely, look. I'm tired of all this crap. I'm coming over there. Donnie, listen to me. I need to be quiet as possible. Come closer to the wall. Baby, it's important. Donnie pressed the side of his head against the discolored sheetrock. Okay, what is it? He didn't have time to scream as the hands burst through the wall, grabbed his head, and pulled. The phone in the grimy office rang. Leonard answered it on the first ring. He never kept it waiting. And now, ladies and gentlemen, yo, what is up, everybody? Your boy Ceresco, back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled Don't Wake Mother, written by Kitty Olsen, the Odd Cat Lady. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author, like, comment, and subscribe. Come on, Sienna, hurry up. I'm gonna get drenched if I stay out here. Even with the threat of getting soaked in ice-cold rain, I did not want to get out of the car. I didn't even want to go out tonight. My plans were to play Baldur's Gate 3 and do absolutely fuck all else. But Poppy, bless her heart, did not accept my plans and just gave me the puppy dog eyes. Can't say no to my best friend, even if what we were doing was, in my humble opinion, dumb as hell. Don't get me wrong, I love Poppy. I've known her since we were babies. Literal, lifelong friendship. But while I was focused on what I could see and touch and verify as real, she had not, to put it lightly. When we were 13, she proudly announced she was now a Wiccan and could communicate with the goddess and the horned god. She dropped Wicca after about 3 months, but other things came and went during that time too. Crystal healing, pendulums, spells, witchcraft unrelated to Wicca, psychics, and of course, tarot cards. He was back on the tarot train this month. It doesn't bother me either way. It's what made her happy, you know? I thought it was all bullshit, but she never actually done something that would be harmful, like using amethyst to cure cancer or whatever. In return, she never pushed me to believe the metaphysical. Never pushed, but she did invite me along to talk with her psychics. You know, sometimes you go along with your friends' plans that don't sound that fun just to spend time with them. I had spent a lot of time in my apartment lately, so I agreed to this plan. Now outside the house, I was having second thoughts. It wasn't like the house had a spooky vibe. It was a bit older, but it was in good condition. It was out in the middle of fucking nowhere though. Nearest neighbor was a farmhouse that was probably half a mile out. There was nothing else out there but cornfields, small patches of woods. Sienna, do I need to drag you out there? I'm freezing. No more delays. I took a deep breath and popped out of the car, immediately regretting my decision not to bring a coat. Poppy had brought her obnoxiously pink and red raincoat that somehow came in sizes for adults. But wherever the coat did not protect, she was soaking wet. Come on. And she looped her arm in with mine and dragged me to the front gate. She quickly undid it before she pressed a finger to her lips. Look, don't make too much noise. We don't want to set off the dog. The stark white gate swung open, and Poppy hop-skipped into the yard. Even in the mostly dark, I could see it was well kept. A small garden was in front of the large bay window, and flowers surrounded the birch tree. I could see the doghouse. I could not see the dog until we were close to the door. The only reason I saw it was because the eyes opened as we got to the door. Its fur was pitch black. Poppy quietly knocked, and we waited for a few moments before I saw someone behind the glass door. The woman who opened it was the last kind of person I could have expected. Most of the time, Poppy dragged me to readings. The host was older, all gaudy jewelry, reeking of incense. The woman on the other side of the door was no older than us, wearing yellow elbow high rubber gloves, a green headband, and a rubber apron. Oh, I lost track of time. I'm sorry, Poppy. I was busy cleaning. The woman pushed a few strands of black hair back past her headbands. Come on in. Make yourselves cozy in the reading room. But try to be quiet. Mother's asleep, and I don't want her to wake up. Oh, you must be her friend. I'm Vanessa. Please, take your shoes off. I just cleaned the rugs this afternoon. I don't want them getting all wet. Hey, I'm Sienna, I managed to say, before Vanessa whisked herself away. I glanced over at Poppy, who was grinning ear to ear, and I finally understood why she insisted I meet the new tarot card reader. Are you serious? What? She's your type. I mean, I don't know if she's gay, but she's got black hair. She's super neat. Don't you start, Poppy. For real, do not start. I had just ended a relationship. I was not eager to jump into another one, even if Poppy was. Poppy stuck her tongue out and then beckoned me into another room. This was a bit more than I expected. Comfy couches, a low table with a deck of tarot cards spread across it, statues of various gods and goddesses on the shelves, along with crystal balls, long sheer curtains hanging over the doorways. The cat was a welcome change of pace though. A tuxedo Maine Coon that was lounging in a fluffy bed. Poppy plopped down on one of the couches, and I sat next to her. The cat looked unimpressed at our intrusion and just yawned before going back to sleep. Vanessa joined us in a few minutes, rubber gloves and apron discarded, and carrying a teapot. Thank you for being patient. Sorry about that. Just got into a cleaning mood, and before you knew it, you were at the door. You want me to use your favorite deck, Poppy? And what deck do you prefer me to use, Sienna? Before Poppy could respond, I blurted out, Oh, I'm just here to be company. I don't believe in tarot. Poppy looked horrified at my bluntness, but Vanessa just quietly giggled as she poured 3 cups of tea. Oh, I'm sorry for assuming. That's perfectly fine. The cards don't really work for people that don't have a bit of faith in them. Other than that, just for fun. You can pet Oreo while I do a reading for Poppy. Oreo slowly blinked twice in my direction, and I did get up to stroke that fluffy cat's ears. I mean, who can resist an invitation to pet a cat, you know? Meanwhile, Vanessa shuffled a deck of cards, started the reading. There was no pitch, no mystical wind-up. It was quite matter of fact how Vanessa went through it. More like a friend giving advice and calling on the powers of the universe to solve your problems. Oh, I'm so glad you got that promotion at work. You really deserved it. Be mindful though, that not everyone will have your best interests at heart. I know you're such a sweetheart. Just because that older guy in your department acts sweet and mentor-like, best give him a wide berth. He's not trustworthy and is just going to hold you back. No, this isn't the time to be boyfriend hunting. You really need to focus on yourself right now and your career. Building a life with someone else, it's much easier when you've made a good foundation with yourself. I mean, you're only 23. There's no hurry. I found myself back on the couch before I knew it, enjoying that mint tea Vanessa had poured for us. Poppy drank down her every word, eyes wide and occasionally nodding as Vanessa spoke. The reading ended with Vanessa patting Poppy on the shoulder. Thanks for coming tonight. The rain's still coming down really hard. You want to wait for it to peter out a bit. I'll get some cookies if you promise you'll still keep quiet. Hey, can you do a reading for me? I didn't even mean to say it. It just popped out. Maybe it's because Vanessa's cute. Maybe because her reading style was genuinely more interesting to me. But now, I wanted to see what she had to say about me. Poppy's jaw dropped, but Vanessa only slightly raised her eyebrows. Well, if you'd like to, I'll choose the deck though, if you're sure. I nodded and watched as Vanessa pulled out a decently sized wooden box underneath her couch. Inside were packs and packs of different tarot cards. Some more traditional, some more goofy and fun. Vanessa traced her fingers over the packs before she selected one that was pale blue with minimalistic pictures of gold filigree. Poppy gasped quietly. Haven't seen that deck before. Oh, it's a new one. You'll be the first to use it, Sienna. I don't know why that felt so flattering, but it did. Vanessa shuffled the deck, her face one of the utmost concentration as the cards were mixed together. The first card she set down was a little guy holding a pentacle. So, this is definitely meant to be you. Good. That's a place I can work from. Are there any particular questions you want me to ask? I shook my head. Okay. Then let's just see what advice the cards have for you today. The second card she turned over, and I shit you not, was literally death. A little golden Grim Reaper was almost cute in his style, but I did burst out laughing. Seriously? Vanessa didn't seem insulted by my incredulity. She actually seemed to find it funny. Seriously, this isn't a bad thing. Look, despite common superstition, this card doesn't talk about actual death. This is all about change, Change is a crucial part of our lives. If things don't change, we stagnate and rot. Just prepare yourself for it. Things end, but new beginnings will begin. She set the cards down and went to pick up another one. But the card she picked accidentally took another one with it. The second card fell onto the table, turning so it was upside down. The Page of Swords. Oh, that's interesting. 10 of Swords. She paused for a moment, pursuing her lips as she clearly considered the meaning of those two. I knew I was drawn to use this deck for a reason. So, I'm gonna ask you, does the color blue and the time 11:11 have any significance for you? Before I could answer, there was a screech of tires and a loud crash outside. Fuck me! I sprang to my feet and was going to head to the door where it slammed open. Vanessa visibly flinched and the color drained from her cheeks. Oh no. You should go. This isn't gonna end well. Vanessa, you fucking bitch. The woman who joined us was furious. Her face flushed crimson, and each footstep taken was a stomp. Vanessa held up both her hands. Please, Becky, quiet down. Mother is sleeping. Shut up. A nerve was now popping out in Becky's forehead. I can't believe you. I'm one of your most loyal clients. I brought you so much business. And how do you repay me? Make my boyfriend dump me. Vanessa swallowed, nervously lacing and unlacing her fingers again. I didn't make him do anything. I swear. Please, you need to be quiet. If you make Mother, she's going to be furious. Yeah. You're just jealous I have a man. You're gonna be lonely, an old cat lady for your whole life. Becky sneered at Vanessa, who just shrunk and looked like she wanted to be literally anywhere else. Becky stepped forward and raised her fist like she was going to punch her. Well, what are you gonna do to make this right, huh? I had more than enough of this chick. I stepped between her and Vanessa, holding up a hand. Hey, she doesn't owe you shit. She told you to shut up, so use your one brain to shut your mouth. Becky seemed to just notice I was even there, and the way she looked over at me, she clearly didn't like the look of me. I was half expecting the next word to come out of her mouth to be something incredibly offensive when the loudest voice yet boomed through the house. Who's making all that racket in my home? I thought the source of that shout had to be stomping down the stairs, but when she turned the corner, I realized quickly that was just because this woman was an actual fucking giant. Standing well over 6 feet tall and with a broad build to match, the elderly's woman-wrinkled face was undeniably crone-like, with thinning white hair sticking out from her liver, spotted scalp, and a large wart on one of her sunken cheeks. The image was finished off by the fact that she was wearing one of those old lady nightgowns, flowy and white, with cornflowers painted on it. Vanessa audibly gulped. Mother, I'm sorry, I was just doing a reading for these two when Rebecca came barging in. She was just leaving. Becky snapped out of her shock of Mother's sudden appearance. I am not leaving until you call my boyfriend and tell him your reading was bogus. Mother snorted like a hog and crossed the room in a few strides. Now tiring of Becky, she tilted her head to the side, and I couldn't help but be reminded of a hawk looking down at a mouse. You mean the reading she gave to that skinny wimp a few days ago? Oh no, it was a good one. He told that he needed to dump your venomous ass on the curb with the rest of the garbage. I didn't say that. I'm paraphrasing, honey. Look, you're a nasty, selfish bitch who makes everyone around her worse. I can only think of one use for you. Becky's jaw hung lower and lower at each of Mother's hurled insults. How dare you? Mother's hands clamped around her neck before Becky could finish her sentence. I froze. I couldn't scream, run, or try to help Becky free. I just stood there as Mother's hands squeezed tight. Becky's eyes popped wide open and she clawed uselessly at Mother's arms. The hag just continued to smirk. I don't know exactly when the elderly woman started growing. I do remember feeling small in her presence, but it wasn't until Mother's head brushed the ceiling my brain caught up to what I was seeing. The elderly woman had sprouted over 2 more feet in height. It was insane. It was so fucking insane, and I still didn't do a thing. Not even when I saw Mother's nail stab into Becky's neck. Each claw like a finger, now dripping blood. I don't know how long she strangled Becky. Shit, it felt like hours. But Becky's gasps and gurgles became quiet. Her struggling grew weaker and slower. And finally, she went limp. Her face a shade of purple I've never seen in a human. Mother finally let go of Becky and she fell to the ground with a smack. Not even a twitch. Becky was dead. The room was dead quiet while Mother examined her claws, genuine claws, not just sharp nails, and sighed, wiping them off in her nightgown. Her beady black eyes turned to me. Shit, I had to be next. I was so screwed. Well, the body's just gonna go to waste if we stand around. Time to get to work. Poppy had also frozen, but that sentence was what kicked her instincts back into drive. She screamed and ran for it. Unfortunately, her path took her right by Mother. In a blur of movement, the giant hag had backhanded Poppy hard enough to send her sprawling to the floor. Vanessa dear, put the scaredy cat back in the back room. Oh, don't pout. I'm not gonna kill her too. Just lock her in until I decide what she can be good for. Well, don't just stand there, other girl. Grab the bitch and drag her into the kitchen. Couldn't believe what she was saying. More so, what I did next. I did exactly what I was told to do. I hooked my arms underneath the corpse's armpits, dragged her along, following the chuckling crone as we left the reading room. I heard Poppy asking what we were doing. We needed to get out of here. He needed to call the cops, but I let her voice fade into the background of white noise in my skull. The kitchen was nothing out of the ordinary, save for the giant butcher slab that was up against the right wall. Mother nodded to the slab. Get her up there. It was not a request. It was an order. It was a struggle lifting the body entirely off the ground. With a bit of shoving and a loud smack, Becky's corpse was now laying on the butcher's block. Mother gave me a long look up and down before grinning proudly. Ah, good girl. What's your name? Deanna? What are you gonna do with her? What do you think I'm gonna do? Give you a proper reading. That's what I'm gonna do. Oh, those cards are cute little gimmicks. My darling Vanessa can use them as efficiently as one can. But she needs to grow up. Tarot cards are child's play. Anthropomancy, now that's how you get real knowledge of things I've known. Depending on the results, I might try osteomancy as well. We'll see. Those words meant absolutely nothing to me. Even when Mother shredded Becky's bright blue tank top off her body, pulled the Narge Life out the rack, I didn't get it. Not until she plunged that knife into Becky's gut and sliced her open. Her innards slipped free, flopping onto the ground with a sickening splat. I stared in horror as Mother stared at them, murmuring quietly to herself as she saw something I couldn't even possibly comprehend. The room was quiet, save for the sound of Becky's intestines sliding out. Finally, Mother grunted before slamming the body back down on the slab. Ah, we're quite alike, you and I, she said so matter-of-factly, I almost burst out laughing. It was so absurd how calm she was now, compared to her fiery rage when she first been woken up. You don't take other people's word for it. You need proof. No blind faith for you. I like that. I swallowed and tried to avoid breathing through my nose. The smell of blood was about enough to bow me over. Like that? Yes. Now, Mother took a different blade and with the finesse of a butcher, started carving up Becky. Slabs of meat were laid to the side, while some prime cuts were literally thrown across the room to an open pot. The reading was clear. I shouldn't let you get away. My heart nearly stopped out of fear when Mother looked up. She was now splattered with blood, which paired her with granny nightgown somehow made her more terrifying. She threw her head back and shrieked with laughter. Not like that, girl. Oh no, you're too much potential to just have for dinner. Mother proceeded to crack open Becky's ribs with her bare hands. She pulled free and held up the woman's heart. Ah, yes, that potential. The readings are clear. Some people think you have to have your head in the cloud to make magic work. That's not true. You need to be grounded. You need to be calm. What makes you think I'm any of those things? You're not running away, are you? You helped carry this bitch to the table. Stayed for your reading, didn't you? Oh girl, you are something special. Mother hurled her fist back and threw the heart to the pot. Put the lid on. We'll be having late dinner tonight. I needed to stop. I needed to get out now. There were other knives in reach. I could get a weapon. I could defend myself. But instead, I crossed the room and, doing my best not to look into the pot, I popped the lid on. The moment I did that, the stove clicked on, small flames flickering underneath the pot. I turned and hated how I was shocked by how fast Mother was carving up the body. The kind of speed that only came with experience. This wasn't Mother's first time butchering a human body. He pulled the ribs free and then with a shout threw them across the floor. Right, so here's what the bones advise. Don't quit your day job yet. You're gonna need the savings. Next month, we'll be starting your training. In a few years, you could actually be an alright witch. No, I don't want to kill people. Good. Then you won't fuck me over by getting caught red-handed. Mother waggled her blood-soaked fingers in the air and cackled. Teaching the bloodthirsty is a great way to end up having to flee a mob. I should know. Vanessa poked her head into the kitchen and sighed as she looked at the bones on the floor. Mother, you really should put tarp down first. I'm gonna have to mop again. Don't tell me how to throw my bones. That is Poppy, isn't it? She locked up. Yes, Mother. I gave her some tea to help calm her. Good, good. Now pick out a nice wine and pair with dinner. Mother shooed Vanessa away. The other woman, avoiding eye contact with me, has headed down into a cellar. He sighed. Oh, my sweet Vanessa. I picked her too. I'm very good at picking witches. But I don't want to be a witch. No, you don't want to be a witch that relies on good vibes and listens to all that do no harm bull. You want to have control of your life. Your fate is ready to be taken. It's just reach away. I can give you that, Sienna. Now, go set the table. The plates are in that cupboard there. Set 3 plates. I don't think Poppy's gonna have much of an appetite. Once you're done, you can have a break. I obeyed her again. It wasn't like I didn't have a choice. I wasn't being mind controlled. I just did what I was told. The plates were fine china, but the silverware had handles that felt like bone. I finally plopped down in one of the chairs and just stopped thinking for a while. I usually tended to lean towards overthinking, but right now I was just blank. I wasn't even sure what I was gonna do when I heard Mother shout that dinner was ready. Numbly, I dragged myself out of the chair and headed for the stove. I flinched when I took off the lid, but when the steam cleared, what I saw was a proper looking pot roast with potatoes, carrots. Look, meat didn't quite smell like beef, but it did smell delicious. My mouth watered, and that almost made me be sick into the pot. I put the lid back on. Come on, don't drag your feet, lazy girl. Get the pot to the table. It's already past 11. Past 11? No fucking way. We'd not come that late in the evening, had we? I glanced up at the clock to confirm Mother wasn't pulling my leg. Vanessa finally reappeared, cradling the bottle of wine. Do you like red wine? I'm more of a vodka drinker. That bit got a smile out of Vanessa, one that had just a hint of darkness that Mother had in her smirks. Oh, you're going to fit in here fine with Sienna. The table set. Mother dishing out our potions of the roast and passing out bread rolls. When you share a meal, you are establishing a relationship. We're beginning something beautiful here, Sienna. Control of your future. I stared down at my plate. Did I want this? Did I want to dive deeper down this rabbit hole? Did I want to finally have a bit of control over my life? I picked up my knife and fork and slowly cut a small piece of meat. I brought it to my lips, hesitated for just a moment, and I took a bite. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? It's your boy Ceresco, back again. Another horror story for you guys. This one is titled The Jungle, written by Matt Demersky. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to them. Like, comment, and subscribe. I drink not because I like alcohol, but because I've recently seen the horrifying underbelly of the world. And I can't go back to blissful ignorance in any other way than through the bottom of a bottle. I can't sleep either. So I'm writing this out to hopefully get some of the poison out of my head. It began with a picture. I'm nobody special, don't get me wrong. Just the opposite. Not a detective, not a cop, nothing like that. I was just a senior in college with an office job lined up, and I only had to coast out to the end of the year. All that free time made me vulnerable to questions. The question and the picture that came with it would have just flawed past my mind like every other bit of internet flotsam, if not for that particular state of aggravated bored I found myself in that freezing February afternoon. 2 local girls had recently gone missing. That much I knew. My year-old friend worked as an intern at the city news channel, and he told me nobody can make heads or tails of what had happened. Look, he wrote in the email. Someone at another news group sent us this. Cops found 2 pictures uploaded from their phones after the last time anyone saw them. They're hoping somebody can identify this guy. I remember rolling my eyes. That was not the first time he wanted, and he forwarded me an email full of internet memes and nonsense. He was a sucker for clickbait. The pictures were the typical scary type, taken in darkness and limited in scope, such that nothing could really be discerned beyond. Look at how weird this is. The first image was taken from directly behind the head of a man with short brown hair, close enough that the flash illuminated his intimate scalp, with bright white lights. He appeared to be somewhere dark and slightly foggy. Over his shoulder, a brandished knife could be seen, held forward for some unknown reason. The second image was of a man lying face down in a hotel bed, surrounded by empty liquor bottles and scattered pills. From his disheveled and sweat-matted short brown hair and the shape of the back of his head, it looked to be the same man. Convenient that his face was hidden in both shots. Behind him was a peeling hotel wall and a mirror that somebody appeared to have spit on. In the mirror, it was possible to see the man's left arm held out in such a manner that he was taking the picture himself with a cell phone. Given the context, I guess the phone belonged to one of the two missing girls. I tended not to believe things like this because they never turned out to be anything. The two girls had likely snuck off to spring break, and this was some sort of prank. Absolute worst scenario, this was just some drunk frat guy they'd hung out with. Let me guess, I wrote back to my friend. Nesper thinks this guy was dead when he took the picture of himself. Ooh, spooky, right? Well, he's definitely recently dead, based on the way his limbs are behaving in that picture, and the discoloration and slight bloating of the skin. But that's not it. It's totally possible to put your camera on a timer, take a picture later. They thought this was a suicide, but they noticed something. Look closer, by his right hand. I enlarged the image on my monitor and realized that there was actually something in his hand. But it couldn't be. I printed out the photo to get a better look, and it was what I had expected. The exact same photo we were looking at was in the dead man's hand. An aging clock on the wall had the same hand positions in both images. He had, in his hand, a picture of himself, dead. Apparently the same photo he would take of himself by using the camera's timer. So I emailed him back. What are we looking at here? Nobody knows, man. But they crowdsourced finding the wallpaper, and they figured out which hotel was taken at. Crowdsourced? Yeah, new technique. They make some clues public and let thousands of people see them online. Eventually someone recognizes the clue, and then they've got a lead. It's a hotel in Brazil. February was almost over, and spring break was nigh. I had an opportunity to do something weird and crazy, and to prove to my friend that clickbait was stupid. Dude, I'm gonna go there. Where? That hotel. You're not serious. Why not? I mean, I got my passport because my mom pestered me to do it last year. And I've got the money to fly down there because of my summer internship. Look, there's nothing to see. I'll hang out on the beach and have a normal spring break, you know? Alright, but look, I can give you the specific hotel, but you sure you want to do that? That's like crazy. The peculiar mix of aggravated boredom and intrigued indignation brewing in me compelled me to say yes. I'd seen so many ridiculous internet myths in my time online that it seemed an incredible opportunity to debunk one. I'd never really left the country before, of course, but I fought down the nervousness and did my best to research everything I could. The hotel was near a popular tourist destination, but it wasn't like I was going somewhere horrible. The beaches were beautiful, if nothing else. The trip by plane was disarmingly familiar. Civilization, air conditioning, a safety shrouded me all through the flight, landing, and disembarkmentation. I waited for my bag while a bunch of people stood around checking their cell phones. Just like home, and it didn't hit me that I'd flown to a foreign country and continent. I barged through the last glass door and it smacked right into a brutal wall, humid heat. It was straight winter back home, and here it was legitimately late summer. I'd chosen my initial clothes poorly, and they immediately became sweat-soaked drapes in a taxi that had no air conditioning. As high as the prices were in the hotel gift shop, and as mass-produced and bland as they were, I bought lighter shirts and shorts, and then sought refuge in my room. I sat by the wall air conditioning unit until I'd recovered, and then I looked around my room. My friend had given me the right info. The wallpaper was the same pattern from the photo, and the bed, the mirror, the clock were all the right design. Did a guy really commit suicide by pills in this hotel under mysterious circumstances? The nearness of it sent a biting air-conditioned shiver down my spine. Scary images sent in email chains online were supposed to be stupid myths, not something from a specific real location. Once acclimated, I fought the churning fear in my stomach and forced myself to walk down to the lobby. I had pictures of the two girls on my phone, and I was debating whether to ask the concierge about them. I didn't have to. Photos were already on a bulletin board by the front desk, among others. I remember laughing nervously. What? Oh, tourist. Yes. Well, I figure I might as well try, or else my friend would mercilessly tease me about flying all the way down here for nothing. I touched the pinned papers. These two. Ah, very bad, very stupid. They went on a hike and never returned. He waved his hands for a moment before seeming to settle with a sigh on a less accurate word. The jungle. It eats people here. That was something more than the gossip back home about the incident. A hike? Ah, yes. Many trails have beautiful sights. Calm and peaceful bellies, the danger beneath. Do not go swimming. The currents are swift. Do not climb. The rocks are loose, and the trees untrustworthy. Do not stay after dark, for the He paused again and appeared to frown at having to use the same word. The jungle. Yeah, it eats people. Is it safe to go alone during the day if I stick to the marked paths? He glared at me, but drew lines on a local map to show where the girls had said they were hiking. Look, man, I don't want to put your picture up there too, but a policia did not go looking, just gave us these papers. We did not risk our own to find foolish tourists. It's possible that those two are still alive. The jungle did not find them at night. Hurt, maybe. It's sad. I gulped but put a brave face. What was I doing? And why? I clutched the local map and adjusted my backpack as the concierge went back to his duties. I should have just gone home. I remember thinking I wanted to go home, or even just to the beach. But presented with a stark, cold fact like that, the police didn't even look? It felt impossible to go sit at the beach and ogle woman while two fellow American girls were possibly dying at the very same time. There were some guides for hire outside the hotel, but I felt less safe with a stranger than by myself. I couldn't stop thinking about the tales of guides tricking people to captivity and selling their organs in the black market. All I had to do was walk a few paths, right? It was stupid. I knew it was stupid. The guide saw my direction, listened to my insistence on going alone, and looked at me as if I was a dead man. When they saw I was serious, one pressed a survival knife into my hand and shook his head when I tried to pay him. I accepted the gift and put it on my backpack before heading down the long dirt road toward the tourist hiking path. This wasn't like the small trails around the hotels and campgrounds back home. The jungle here was not a mastered entity. A life was swarming everywhere. Thick clouds of insects hovered together, only to be scooped up by flocks of little birds. Or perhaps they were bats. I wasn't sure. It was humid as hell and stuffy under the thick canopy of gloom and green. But I'd somehow stumbled my way into a mission, and I couldn't turn back without hating myself. A creek about a foot wide presented itself a few steps off the path, and I nearly went over to it to splash and cool myself down before I remembered the concierge's warnings. I took out a long stick and lowered it, only to have the branch jerked out of my hands. The creek was a foot wide, but impossibly deep, and the current under these placidly flowing bubbles was murderous. The girls had fallen in here. No, their phones had uploaded photos after they disappeared. Whatever had happened, it had not involved instant death. Where would they have gone? For hours, I followed the path they'd indicated to the concierge until I reached a fork in the narrow, overgrown trails. One path followed the black line he'd drawn, and the other led to what looked like a gorgeous waterfall basin. Never in my life had I experienced such a strong fatal instinct. They'd gone the less traveled path in the hopes of taking gorgeous pictures for their online profiles. Thus, possibly, it was death by Facebook. Another 20 minutes of exhausting hike later, I found that the wide round basin was accessible down a steep scree and then along a slope of crumbling roots sprouting dirt. I ever so carefully picked my way down and then nearly stumbled over a shoe. It was a dirty, black American sneaker, and I picked it up to examine it. Jumping back and letting out a short scream of shock, I threw it down to the ground. It had a foot in it. A foot! Holding back overwhelming revulsion, I peeled back the tongue of the sneaker and confirmed that it was a female foot. Oh God, I can still remember how it smelled. I can still remember the swarming flies and budding maggots in that stump of red flesh. Yep, they were dead. I leaned back against the root-sprouting dirt wall behind me and tried not to throw up. I'd come all the way out here to find a rotting foot. This was why the police hadn't looked. Why they never looked. They were all right in assuming anyone that didn't come back from this horrible tangle was just plain dead. I checked my cell phone. No signal, of course. I couldn't see the sun through the maze of greenery above, but my phone said it was getting late on the schedule I'd set for myself. Dusk would be coming, and it was time to head back. Even though I'd ignored the warning about climbing, I intended to heed the one about avoiding nighttime. Every single bush and hillock out here hid something alive that I didn't want to see what might emerge in the dark. And then I heard her. Help! It was the faintest echo through the dense foliage, but I was dead certain it had been a hopeless female shout. I shouted back half a dozen times, even screaming till my throat was raw. But she didn't seem to hear me in return. Or maybe she was incapable of shouting again. It hit me. One rotting foot didn't mean they were both dead. They could both have been alive for all I knew, and the foot was a result of some injury or animal attack that left them stranded or hurt out here. Damn, if only I'd gone home 30 seconds earlier, I wouldn't have to keep looking. The waterfall above was beautiful, but austere. There was no climbing up that way, which meant the girls had likely followed the resulting narrow river. If they were unable to climb back up the scree, I'd just come down. Judging my footholds and handholds, I clambered along clean rock, thankful to be out of the tangle for a time. The progress wasn't hard, just precarious, and I guess that someone could do it minus a foot if needed. Eventually, the terrain became more like a canyon, with a river at the bottom, and I was forced to lift up onto dirt again. Here, I found an animal trail splitting off in 3 directions. A cell phone with a cracked screen lay half buried. I brushed it off to discover that it still had some battery power, and it was not password protected. The text messages were mostly mundane conversations from the owner to her friends. The most recent ones were variations on help and are you getting this? Based on frustration from the lack of signal out here, there was no information about what happened. But then I checked the pictures on her camera. Beyond all the typical selfies and photos of the airport, the flight, the hotel, There were a few of the jungle I just traversed, the waterfall basin, and then the very path I was standing on. The next picture seemed to be taken from hiding between the leaves. The image showed a man brandishing a knife and peering into the underbush opposite. I still couldn't see his face, but he was dressed in local wear I recognized from the shop. Had he seen the girls at the hotel, followed them out here? From the back of his head was the same man from the suicide picture. This was serious. I needed to be ready for a fight or to run. Suddenly tense, I put my backpack down, hid it under the few bushes, and withdrew the survival knife the guide had given me. With the knife out and at the ready in one hand and a cell phone in another, I swiped slowly through the photos. The next few were of the trail I was on, and I followed it step by step, retracing the path the girls had gone. The man was not in these pictures. They seemed to be photos of landmarks that might help them find their way back. Many were blurry, but I had taken in haste. No doubt they'd been running. I couldn't shout anymore either, not without potentially revealing my presence to that man. Had he cut off one of the girl's feet or something? I had her foot ended up back by the waterfall. Swipe. There's the rock. Swipe. Okay, there's the bend on the path. Swipe. There's the arranged stones to mark a direction when no other landmark would suffice. A few more swipes and I was back where I started. The animal trails split off in 3 directions. I could hear the river out beyond the trees. So they'd come full circle by accident. Realized they were lost. Then what? Drop their phone here in frustration? Or had they run into the man with the knife again and gotten caught? If there were 3 paths out here and 2 looped to one another, that meant the middle one had to go elsewhere, right? I heard a noise behind me. Whirled, saw nobody and nothing. I stared out into the jungle as dusk swept a dim shroud between the trees. I'd stayed too long and night was almost upon me. I had to go home. Like, seriously, what was I gonna do? Fight a knife-wielding man in the dark? I could just get the cops and bring down the cavalry. And then I heard her. Help! It came from down the middle path. Oh no. As it became harder and harder to see, I crept down that middle path, my knife held forward. There was someone out there. I would only have a split second to strike back or run. The only advantage I had was that they had no idea I was here, and it was as hard for them to see me as it was for me to see them, as long as I only checked the phone intermittently, keep the light to a minimum. Swipe. A picture of the middle path was gloom. Alright. On a night sometime earlier this week, they'd gone this way. Had they again looped back somehow to drop this phone? I swiped ahead a few times to see multiple shots of the path I was on. I stopped at a shot of the knife-wielding man from the side. All that could be seen was a silhouette in deep forest dusk. Looking at the shot disturbed me. Was I witnessing the events leading up to someone's murder? I swiped back to the path shots and continued following their trail. When I reached the spot where the man's picture had been taken from the side, I heard something crunching out in the darkness. I froze for what felt like an eternity as dusk became approaching night. All my senses told me that something was out there. Something was waiting and watching with malicious intent. Perhaps even with glee. I could feel it. As absolute darkness fell, a change came over the humid and dense air. The birds went quiet, and my ears stopped hearing their shrieking calls with a sudden internal echo. I thought I'd gone deaf for a moment, but I could still hear my own breathing. Moving step by quiet step back down the path and behind a boulder, I got out the phone to light my way and check for their pictures. Help! I turned my head suddenly to try to get a bead on the scream in the absolute silence. It sounded closer somehow. Help! This time, it came from the opposite direction, a little bit further. Help! That one came from the right on the path ahead, exactly where I had been walking before the sensation of being watched had stopped me in my tracks. It was the same scream every single time. The same intonations, the same length, the same emotion. I swallowed down panic. That girl had died days ago, and someone or something was using her last scream to toy with me. It was insane to think so, but it was the only conclusion. Swiping all the way ahead in the pictures on her phone, I found a photo of an arm over her face. A man was wincing against the flash of the camera. As they used the flash as a weapon to blind them, I held my arm up as a series of flashes erupted right in front of my face. I couldn't choose a direction. I just ran. Somehow, someone or something had snuck right up in front of me, and somehow, no, it was impossible, but pushing down the trail, I ran in absolute terror until the same scream erupted a few feet ahead of me. Help! It was loud this time, painfully loud, and I sliced at empty darkness. The light from the phone showed nothing ahead, just unmoving leaves and fronds. I held the knife forward with no idea what I could even do with it, until a series of flashes went off right behind my head. Was it behind me? I ran for my life. Down the dirt, climb along the river canyon in the dark, led up the scree, and sprained my ankle. That's what I remember. Limp along the path I'd come down earlier that day. I'd lost my backpack and the map inside it. I thought I could remember, but the jungle transforms at night. All the landmarks I looked for were impossible to find in the darkness, and I knew something was out there hunting me. Obviously, because I'm writing this now, as I said, to get the poison out of my head. I made it out of there, but not for nearly a day. I spent that night crammed into a small rock hollow with stones piled up to the block, the entrance, and only enough space for my knife to stab out. All night long I hear, "Help! Help! Help!" from right outside my hollow. Help! Help! Laughter and random bits of conversation mimicking what the two girls had said to each other before danger had found them. It stalked and watched them for hours before night had fallen. A foot. That's all that was left. A foot severed by powerful jaws. When dawn finally rolled around, my sleepless body practically dragged itself out of its own accord. I don't fully remember what happened when I returned to the hotel, but they took care of me, and I did not tell them I found their cell phone. And you know what? It's been 5 days, and I'm supposed to fly back to the States tomorrow night. But I happen to know I'll never make it. I sit in my hotel room and stew in my own nightmare. I can hear it calling from the deep of the night. It's out there, mocking me still, waiting because it knows I can't escape. All of those pictures were taken before they ever happened. All part of the horror in the jungle, where time knows nothing of the strict structure of civilization. I only came out of here because of that last picture, the only one that hasn't come true yet. How messed up is that? So, I sit here clutching the photo I printed out with the last picture, and I drink. And I take pills to try to knock myself out before it comes for me. I'm not killing myself. I just don't want to be awake when it happens. It's creeping closer now. The cruelest part of this clock on the wall. I know the exact moment as it ticks closer and closer, second by second. Another swig, few more pills. It's slithering up around the bottom of the clock now. The bottom of the basin. The bottom of my heart. Numbing. He said it, and I didn't listen. Jungle wasn't the right word, and he straight up said it. He told me directly. It eats people here. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? It's your boy Ceresco, back again. Another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled The Devouring Mirror, written by H.K. Reyes. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author. Like, comment, and subscribe. Oh, that one is very special, said the old man running the antique shop. Emily looked up from her phone to see a large Baroque mirror with a gilded frame of carved flowers. The late afternoon sunlight that shone through the storefront glittered over the frame, making the flowers appear to throb and writhe on the wall. The spotless circle of glass reflected Emily's body back to her. Wispy black hair, round pensive face, baggy blue sweatshirt, feathered bare jeans with holes near the pockets. Her nose twitched at how ridiculous she looked, encircled in flowers on this tacky thing. "Oh, it's perfect, isn't it, Em?" her mother said. Emily said nothing. She refreshed her feed on her phone and scrolled down to the picture she had posted some hours ago. A carefully edited selfie with her acne digitally removed and her cheeks and chin warped to appear slimmer. No likes and no comments still. "Oh, it'll look wonderful in your room. Brighten things up in there a bit. I've been trying to redecorate and improve the ambiance in there. You know how teenagers get, doom and gloom, even when they don't have anything serious to complain about." The old man's smile was warm, and his faintly yellow teeth gleamed behind his thin gray lips. "Oh, I think the world can be a harsh place for a young person today." "Oh, to hear this one tell it, you'd think she'd suffered as much as Mother Teresa." She tilted her head back and let out a high, rolling laugh. A laugh that Emily knew well. It meant that her mother was only kidding, and that anyone who took offense to her words was simply too sensitive. Emily's phone buzzed. A cute boy from her French class had left a comment on her photo. She swiped it open excitedly, but her shoulders slumped when she saw that it was just a pig emoji. "You know, Smir has quite a history. Belonged to a wealthy Romanian gentleman in the 18th century who cherished it above all his possessions. Even as his fortune dwindled to nothing, he refused to sell it. He is said to have spent hours sitting before the glass, contemplating its depths. Apparently, he developed some rather curious beliefs with regard to the mirror. He was convinced it had been enchanted with great power." Emily smirked, and when she looked up from her phone, she saw the old man was entirely serious. According to his letters, he believed that he could see things within the mirror, more than simply his reflection. He was convinced the mirror could fulfill certain desires of his. The mother opened her purse. "Well, no need to worry about that. Emily fulfills her desires enough as it is." She patted Emily's round belly, hidden in the folds of the sweatshirt. Emily swatted her away with an annoyed grunt. The mother laughed again and fished for her wallet in her purse. Emily moved away from the counter, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She turned to glare at the back of her mother's head, but an odd feeling of unease floated through her. Her gaze drifted toward the mirror. Her conscious mind grasped for an explanation as to why she felt so anxious all of a sudden. But all it could come up with was the absurd notion that whenever she looked away from the mirror, her reflection would look away just a bit more slowly, like it was trying to stare at her for a moment longer. "Don't you think 2 servings is enough already, Em?" her mother called from down the hall. Emily pulled the door shut to her room and slumped into her creaking desk chair. She set down her dinner plate with a heavy glass clunk. She glared at herself in the ugly mirror that was now hanging over her desk. No, she thought to herself, not tonight. She opened her laptop and played a video, trying to ignore the cold, aching pressure gathering in her chest. 2 servings is enough. I'm not even hungry anymore. It should be enough, isn't it? She glared at the plate of uncooked spaghetti with its sticky coating of cold tomato sauce. Not even any good, she thought. Gross. I hate it. I don't want it. But the cold, oppressive pain pressed down on her chest, pressed until it seemed to suck the air right out of her lungs. She slammed her laptop shut, snatched the plate, and shoved pasta in her mouth. She tasted nothing, eating only for the temporary relief it brought from the pain. Even then, food was hardly relief at all. Just a single stone removed from a great heap under which she had been buried. She set the bowl down and pressed her palms into her eyes. A few tears leaked out, but she held her breath, stifling the urge to sob. She didn't need her mother bursting in to lecture her on how good her life was. You're pathetic, she thought to herself. Pathetic and fat and ugly, awful. She lifted her head to say those words out loud. She saw that her reflection was smiling at her. She gasped. Terror flashed through her, and her legs became slabs of frozen iron. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. The reflection touched his finger to its lips. Its smile held no malice, no hostility. Kindness and warmth radiated from his deep brown eyes, which, unlike Emily's, had a slight reddish tinge to them that made them seem brighter and more lively than her own. Emily felt her fear leaving in a slow pace. She raised her hand, its fingers barely peeking from the sleeve of her sweatshirt, and she waved. The reflection girl giggled silently and waved back. Emily swallowed to moisten her throat. What are you? The reflection brought its hand to its chin in a cartoonish show of thinking. It shrugged and giggled. What do you want? The reflection licked its lips and rubbed its belly. You're hungry? It nodded emphatically. Well, I have some food here. Do you want that? The girl in the mirror nodded eagerly. It reached out with both hands for the plate of pasta on its side of the mirror. Ignoring the fork, it scooped up a big handful, opened its mouth much wider than Emily could, and ate it. Emily's plate didn't move, but the portion that had been eaten disappeared in a puff of purplish smoke. Emily watched, eyes white-rimmed and shining with amazement, as the food vanished from her plate with the girl's every bite. Before long, the reflection had finished the meal, and Emily's plate was empty, save for a slick purple residue on the surface. The reflection leaned back, patted its belly with its sauce-covered hands, and belched silently. Emily stared at the empty plate on her desk. It's gone. It's gone, and I feel full? No, that's not quite right. Physically, she could tell she hadn't eaten anything, but she had tasted every bite the reflection had taken, and there was a profound sense of satisfaction in her heart, as though some spiritual appetite within her had been sated, even if her body had not. The reflection leaned forward and, with a hand dripping in sauce, wrote on the glass, "More." Emily jumped from her seat and ran to the kitchen. Her mother called down the hallway, "Dessert too? Em, you're never gonna meet any boys unless you start taking better care of your..." Emily slammed her door and dumped an armful of candy, chips, and ice cream on her desk. The reflection ate ferociously, ripping packages open with its teeth, shoveling sweets and snacks to its gaping mouth by the fistful. By midnight, both Emily and her reflection were slumped over, exhausted on their desks. The reflection's belly, now round and distended, rose and fell with every labored breath. Emily felt full to bursting, even as her stomach growled. That was amazing. It was like eating, but not eating. I don't have to feel bad about it. The reflection laughed. Potato chip flecks splattered against the inside of the glass. She lifted her finger and wrote in a smear of grease and melted ice cream, "I will eat for you, so you become beautiful." Why are you being so nice to me? She writes, "Because you, same." Emily slept soundly that night, feeling that life was about to become very different. Night after night, Emily brought her dinner to her room and watched her reflection devour it all. She would pile her plate with as much as it could hold, and the girl in the mirror would eat and eat till its belly looked ready to split open. Yet, it never seemed to be satisfied. Every night, with a hand coated in sauce or grease, it would write in the mirror, "More." And every night, Emily would feed it again. No longer desiring food for herself, Emily began to lose weight. The roundness in her face pulled inward like a blueberry shriveling in the sun. Her waist shrank, her limbs became long, thin poles, and her fingers were as spindly as spider legs. Where she once dreaded stepping on the scale, now she looked forward to it as it was her favorite part of the day. She bought one for her room and placed it right in front of the mirror so she could track the dwindling number and celebrate milestones with her reflection. She ditched the hoodies and baggy t-shirts for slim dresses, fitted jeans, and crop tops. The boys who had ignored or mocked her since childhood began to take notice. They flirted with her, or tried to, in their clumsy and awkward way. She could sense how nervous they were when they spoke to her, how eager, yelping for her attention like puppies. She could sense the power she had over them, and she liked it. Not all the attention was pleasant. Some of the girls became rude and nasty, especially the ones whose boyfriends cast glances in her direction. They spread wild, obscene rumors. That whore, they would say. Do you hear what she did with Mr. Blackwell in the equipment room behind the gym? It's true, Stella saw everything. Sometimes the girls were so mean that Emily would race home to cry at her desk. Her reflection, by now enormously fat, would fog up the mirror with its breath, and write in the thick, stubby finger, "Just jealous." Yes, jealous. Emily knew it was only jealousy that motivated the cruelty of the other girls. They said it had been jealousy that drove Mrs. Cobb to hold her back after biology class one day. I'm very concerned for your health, he had said. Poor nutrition can have serious consequences for your body. Look, I want you to know that you're not alone. I'm here to support you and help you find healthy ways to blah, blah, blah. Emily had rolled her eyes and walked out. Some nights, as the mirror girl was chomping down on its food, a pang of true hunger would strike Emily like a bullet. She would feel the urge to eat something real. But whenever she reached for a bite, the mirror girl would nip at its own finger, and Emily would feel it. Yes, she's right. She wouldn't let me make bad decisions. She is me, after all. Emily sat across from her mother at the dinner table. A steamy plate of gooey casserole sat untouched in front of her. May I be excused? Her mother set her napkin on her lap and said, Em, when I said I wanted to eat together, it wasn't because I like watching you sulk. Eat something. Emily huffed, gathered up a cheesy bite, and stuck it in her mouth. She pushed the food into her cheek, where it could be stored and spat out later. There, can I be excused now? Her mother set her fork on her plate and clasped her hands together. Your teacher phoned me today to express concerns for your health, as she put it. She said she's worried I haven't been feeding you enough. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was for me? Emily pushed her plate away and took out her phone. No phones at the table, but Emily ignored her. Her feed was glittering with notifications for her latest photo, a selfie in a tight pink dress. People talk, you know. I'm sure your teacher's talking already. Oh, they all pretend to be concerned about this and that, but in reality, they're judging you, laughing at you. That trashy family, they're saying. Look what a mess they are, too poor to even afford food. Emily scrolled through her photos, basking in the likes and shares. A notification popped into view, and she saw that the cute boy from her French class had commented on her selfie. Look, I'm just looking out for you, Em. I know you've been improving yourself, and that's admirable, but I don't want you to go as far as you ended up looking bad. You might end up making us look bad. Emily smiled, and she opened the notification, but her face fell when she saw that the boy had only commented with a skeleton emoji. Look, I just want you to be happy, Em. Emily looked up at her mother's arrogant, pitying smile, and something in her cracked. Stop calling me Em. My name is Emily. The outburst shocked them both. A charged silence gripped the room. The air itself seemed to become thin and cold, like pressure dropping before a storm. The mother's hands fell slowly to the table. I named you. You wouldn't even have a name if it weren't for me. I can call you whatever I want. Emily's heart raced. Her hands felt cold, like she couldn't get enough blood into them. You always do what you want. You never care about what I want. You don't even ask. I don't ask because I don't want to get any useful information. What would you say if I asked what you want? To sulk around in your room all day and with your face buried in your phone? To yell at me just because I'm trying to do what's best for us? Rage and fear churned Emily's blood. Her hands gripped at the table. You're not looking out for us. You're only looking out for you. I'm not stupid. Even if you think I am, you couldn't care less about me. Her mother tilted her head back and laughed. Oh, yes, and that's why I spent hundreds of dollars on an antique mirror for your room. That's why I spent so much money on all those nice new clothes you wanted. That's why I wasted an hour of my time to make dinner for you tonight, even after I've been working since 6 o'clock this morning. Emily slammed her fist on the table. You're the reason I hate food. You made me feel bad about everything I've ever eaten. I thought if I got skinny, you would be nice to me. But now you're worse than ever. Oh, so you're angry I made a few jokes. I knew you were oversensitive, but this takes the cake. No, I'm angry you treat me like dirt because you're jealous. You're jealous that I look good, and you just look like the awful old bitch you are. Her mother drew back, like she'd been struck. Emily knew at once she had crossed the line. A great gust of fear swirled through her. She felt dizzy and lightheaded. Her mother then stood from her seat. Why on earth would I be jealous of a miserable, sniveling little brat like you? You think you're hot stuff now, but I know what you really are inside. You'll always be a fat, weak little pig, no matter what you look like. The words scorched Emily to the soul, and she ran out of the room. She slammed her door shut and collapsed into a loud, racking sobs. Pain gathered in her chest, the dull pressure she knew so well. This time, it was accompanied by a feeling of tightness, like a great constricting snake had coiled around her heart. She lifted her head and squinted through the tears in the mirror. Her reflection was staring back at her in confusion, sympathy. Its jowly cheeks sagging, its hair shining with grease, its rolls of body fat shuddering with every movement. This is really what I am, she thought. This is what I'll always be. The reflection wrote with its oily finger. What wrong? Just leave me alone. The girl kept writing. Her? Mother? She hates me. And she's right too. I'm disgusting. The reflection wrote. I can help. What could you do to help me? It wrote, hungry. I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure dinner's ruined for tonight. The reflection shook its head. No, not usual dinner. What do you want then? A soft knock at the door startled her. Her mother's voice came through softly. Em? Can we talk? Em turned toward the reflection to tell her to wait, but the words written on the glass stopped her cold. Hungry for meat. The door opened and the mother stood in the doorway. Daylight was fading quickly and shadow had pulled into the depressions around her eyes. Oh, Em, I'm very sorry. We sort of let things get out of hand there, didn't we? Emily stood up with difficulty. Her heart felt like it was sputtering in her chest, like a motor running out of fuel. She leaned against the desk for support and saw that something had changed in the reflection's face. No, not a face anymore. Not exactly. It was something else. The mother stepped into the room, her white skirt undiluted shadow as she moved. I shouldn't have said that just now. It was a terrible thing to say. I have no excuse. To be honest, I was just shocked by how much you sounded like me at your age. Emily gazed into the reflection's eyes. Eyes that no longer resembled her own. Eyes that became warm pools of crimson red above a grinning, toothed maw. And she understood. In fact, I'm pretty sure I said the same thing to your grandmother just before I left home. It's funny how these things work out. I'd swore I'd never be anything like her. I bet you told yourself the same thing. Truth washed over Emily like a cold, cleansing rain. Yes, she understood now. She had been hungry all her life, but not for food. No, she had eaten to ease the pain of living. All she had needed was one particular bite. You know, I tried to make things different for you. Got us a home, so you would never know what it's like living out in a car. Bought us nice things, so you wouldn't have to be embarrassed about bringing anyone over. It was all so obvious. Emily wondered how she had never seen it before. No matter. She knew what had to be done now. That was enough. He touched her hand to the mirror, and through the glass felt the reflection's scaly claw on the other side. Look, I tried to avoid the old trap, but it seems like I just found another way to fall into it. The mirror thing pulled away, and on its side of the glass crept up behind the mother. Its teeth glinted like broken glass as its lipless mouth pulled open. I guess what your grandmother just said before she died is true. You don't face your demons, you end up feeding them. The creature arched like a cobra and struck, sinking its teeth into the woman's throat. The mother's head snapped back, and she was thrown backward against the wall. Her fingers shot to her neck, grasping at the invisible force that had suddenly constricted around her windpipe. Blood vessels burst in her eyes, coloring the whites a bright scarlet. She tried to scream, but could only squirt a wet gurgle from her crushed throat. The skin of her throat puckered and split in a jagged, bleeding line. The mirror creature wrenched its head back, and the flesh vanished in a puff of purple smoke. Blood gushed from the open wound. It sucked into her windpipe as she struggled to breathe, came up again, pink and frothy. Emily tasted her mother's throat exploding into her mouth. Blood pumped over her tongue like juice from a ripe tomato. The reflection chewed, and Emily tasted the soft, yielding meat. She threw her head back and laughed, a wild, gleeful sound that was halfway to screaming. As her mother reached out for her and mouthed,
Help.
Emily leaned down and laughed in her face. "What's the matter, Mom? It was just a joke. You're not too sensitive now, are you?" Emily's heartbeat was wild, regular. The tightness in her chest exploded to a blazing white fire. She was still laughing, savoring the blood and meat, when her legs gave out from under her and she was swallowed in the darkness. Later that night, the old man at the antique shop noticed with a mild surprise that the mirror had returned to its usual spot on the wall. "Oh my, you've come home early." He placed both hands on the frame and leaned his face towards the glass, as though he were dunking his head to a barrel of black water. "Oh, I see. Well, that woman was awful. Serves her right. Pity about the young girl, though. But not unexpected, given how weak her heart must have been at that level of undernourishment." He let go of the mirror and shuffled back behind the shop counter. Darkness pressed in on him, and he wore it like a slithering robe. Not even moonlight touched him. Still, it seems that everyone got what they wanted. All in all, a successful sale, I'd say. No time to rest on our laurels, gentlemen. Another customer might arrive at any minute. His teeth were a pale yellow crescent as he sat behind his counter and smiled in the dark. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? Your boy Ceresco back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled Untold Tales of Horror, Now Told, written by Dale Thompson. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author, like, comment, and subscribe. Devilish dolls, haunted houses, ghoulish ghosts, freaky frights, dreadful demons, blood-sucking bats, peculiar pumpkins, bizarre bridges, fiendish phantoms, atrocious apparitions, malfeasant monsters, wicked witches, and all things that go bump in the night. Welcome to Untold Tales of Horror Now Told. I am your host, Alistair Mortimer Caneswright. Tonight, we will tell the tales that no one is brave enough to tell. If you believe in the University Halloween Massacre, or that perhaps there are secret tunnels running below your university that house the dead, the ghosts of suicide victims hanging in your university hallways, or that stone statues come alive at night to eat students, then this program is for you. Alistair ran through his podcast within his normal time and with a grand send-off. Well, I hope that was scary enough for you. Until we scare again, this is Alistair Mortimer Caneswright signing off. Alistair closed his door with a sensational feeling of satisfaction. His stories this night were his own creations. Sometimes, when he had been lessened and inspired, he would read submissions from other writers. But this night, he read 2 of his own horrifying. The night closed its darkness around the college town. Hard pressed to see, Alistair guided himself home, noticing the faint glimmer of artificial lights from windows and street lamps. But overall, the town was asleep, idle and in a dormant state. Alistair seemed to be the only one who was making his way home. After an exciting night of horror stories told exclusively by him for his many podcast listeners, he had no immediate plans for bed. He was a nocturnal creature, loving the nightlife. His thoughts were on the response he would get from his show. The show went out live, and people were free to respond as the show developed. Later, he would post it on various other sites which would promote his work. His voice was in high demand. Many broadcasters looked forward to his work because it brought a much larger audience. Alistair looked forward to reading his comments after the show. It was a way for him to wind down. Once he reached his humble abode, which was nothing like his audience likely believed he lived in, he first scooped up his hairless Sphinx cat, Abaddon, and made his way to the kitchen. There, he heated some milk in a dish, poked his finger in to make sure the temperature was acceptable, and let his kitty go at it while he booted up his computer. He poured himself a large orange juice and retrieved a bag of salted pretzels from the cupboard before plopping down loosely on his favorite broken-in leather chair. The monitor lit up, and the screen was inundated with message after message commenting on the stories he had read live on air. He read with great satisfaction. It appeared it was another hit. His mind whirled ahead, spiraling deliberations while musing over what was next. He had written many haunting stories of thrilling terror, but should be exhausted. Did he exhaust them so quickly? He probably wouldn't read so many of his own in a row, so to string them out a while longer is probably the best idea. But one of the listeners were aware of Alistair. He was dying. The doctor gave him 6 months, and he had defied every prediction and was on 11 months plus. If he were honest, he had never felt better than right now. If he could freeze time, this would be the instance when he would make it stand still. He understood the odds were stacked against him. However, he was quite a fighter. He was the sort of guy that if you hit him and knocked down, you prayed he was out cold. Otherwise, he was going to get back up and give a real beating to you. Alistair read every comment and personally responded to his subscribers. A couple hours later, he and Abaddon settled off to bed. He was too exhausted for a second shower of the day. He would take care of the podcat stench in the morning. Sometimes in the night, he was awakened by a pinging sound. He could have sworn he had muted the sound on his computer, but he mustered the strength to get out of bed and mute the volume. He would not be able to bear the incessant sound all night. Soon as his head hit the pillow, he was out like a light. Bing! Again, his computer made a terrifically horrible sound. Mumbling to himself, he stormed to a computer like a drug zombie who had lost his cool. Not playing around this time, he muted the volume again and took the computer to the kitchen, far from his bedroom. Hopefully, he would not be disturbed again. Returning to his bedroom, he brushed Abaddon off his pillow and crashed into the bed with a thud. Abaddon was not bothered. He purred quietly in some feline dream world. Alistair jerked violently out of a deep sleep and did not know why. His brain was scrambled, but he quickly gathered his senses. He now realized something had given him a fright. There had been an uncommon sound from the kitchen. A commotion and disturbance, like a giant gong being smashed. Logically, he imagined the pan was unbalanced and slipped off into the sink or into the floor. He hoped, if it was the floor, that the tiles were not chipped or cracked. Staggering through the dimly lit hallway to the kitchen, trying to avoid stepping on Abaddon, who was dodging under his heels. In the dark, he stepped on one of the assorted cat toys lying around. It just so happened that it was a hard toy with the prongs which stick out. It didn't hurt as bad as a Lego, but it still smarted. He threw out a sleepily expletive and motored on towards the kitchen. Alistair flipped on the light. The kitchen looked normal. He saw nothing out of place. Wait. Its kitchen door, leading to the back door garden, was a tiny bit cracked. It was minuscule, hardly noticeable, yet he detected it. A chill raced down his spine. He was overflowing with anticipation and consequential excitement. Somewhat afraid, Alistair made a quick scan of the kitchen to ensure he was positively alone. If anybody or anything had entered the house, they would not have made it any further in the kitchen. He assured himself. Going to the door, his ears were perked for any noises. Slowly, he opened the door wider and turned on the backyard light. It was a powerful light that lit his narrow yard and shone as far as his rear gate, which led out into the main street. 6-foot hedges ran down the sides of his yard, thick and impenetrable. But there, impressed in the grass from the gate to the kitchen door, there was one set of footprints in the dew-covered grass. The footprints led to the door, but there was no evidence of them returning to the rear gate. How odd. Barefoot and only in boxers and a t-shirt, he opted not to check the gate just yet. He closed and locked the door. Still spooked and nervy about the door, he opted to get dressed, put on his shoes, which were in the bedroom, and investigate the backyard a little closer and with more scrutiny. With great suspicion and holding a Louisville Slugger baseball bat firmly in his hand, he entered the backyard. He measured his shoe size with the imprint in the grass. Whoever was lurking in his backyard had at least a size 12 shoe. He imagined that it was one big fella. Once Alistair reached the gate, his misgivings were confirmed. The gate was ajar. He did not like this. He did not like this one bit. Speedily, he secured the gate and turned to go back to the house. But something peculiar took place that gave him pause. The kitchen light flickered in sequence several times, and at the end of the blinking, the backyard light was extinguished. Holy mother of pearl, he said to himself. Stiffened in place with a sensation not much different than rigor mortis, Alistair watched the window of the lit kitchen. He was not going back until he was sure it was safe. Gathering his nerves, which were severely frayed at this point, he approached his house with a sense of dread and heightened caution. The kitchen light remained illuminated, and this gave him some assurance. Working his way up to the window, he sneaked a peek. Initially, he saw nothing. All looked as it should. He considered the all-light episode, and with no other evidence of eldritch happenings, the only plausible explanation was the bulb in the backyard must have shorted out. With his trepidation easing, he wanted to guarantee his safety, so he opted for another look through the window just to ease his fear. What he saw nearly made him pass out. He was in the kitchen. He saw himself on his back, turned toward him, standing at the table. The person hovering his kitchen table looked identical to him. They were even dressed like him. What the devil? The grip on the baseball bat loosened as a paused terror swept over him like a hot towel and bore down into the pit of his gut to the point where he swayed with nausea. He leaned on the house with his shoulder and attempted to will strength back into his rubbery legs. Alistair was not necessarily a brave man. His courage had never really been challenged before. Oh, he stuck up for himself in high school when he bullied. But this was something otherworldly. Could it even be possible? How does something as bizarre as this even occur? This was just like the unutterable secrets he wrote and did voiceovers for on his podcast. He had to be imagining things. Of course, he attempted to dissuade himself. Maybe he was dreaming still. A rational answer would come to him. He knew it, but nothing came. The only thing he could convince himself of was there was a duplicate of himself haunting his own kitchen. The yard lit up, not with light from the back porch, but with a resonating chatter that could only be called al-as-if, which H.P. Lovecraft defined in his writing as that nocturnal sound made by insects supposed to be the howling of demons. The definition was birthed from the ruins of Babylon out of the empty space of amorphous crimson desert. Alistair had read all of Lovecraft's materials. Lovecraft was locked into secrets of grace older than mankind. The sounds Alistair was tortured with were far beyond the sound of common insects and bugs that crawl and fly at night. He pondered, what if Lovecraft had a phrase, al-as-if, defined incorrectly? What if he meant something altogether totally different? Possibly he was misunderstood, and it meant al-tajif, the blasphemy, and al-zanif, the bleeding. Alistair was unsure why these thoughts were penetrating his mind and obscuring his thoughts, along with breaking his concentration. He had to focus. What does any of this mean? What does it have to do with me? He forced himself to premise his thoughts, and once he had control of them and built up the boldness, he concluded that the kitchen and the unwanted occupant warranted another glance. With waning audacity, he took a glint inside the kitchen. Seeing no one, he slowly raised and surveyed everything in view. He held his lookout position for at least 60 seconds until he was confident the coast was clear. This is when he let out a sigh of relief, and his anxiety began to settle back to his comfort zone. With his equilibrium restored, it was time he took his chances. With his mind free from exile, he walked in through the back door into the kitchen and took notice of a manuscript on the table. It did not appear overly thick, but there were several pages. He tightened his grip once again on the handle of the bat near the knob end. With his free hand still eyeing the doorway from the kitchen into his hallway, he dragged the manuscript closer to him. He had to sit down. His adrenaline had depleted. The manuscript was possibly animal skin and had a note attached to it. I am you, and you are me. There is only one way to be free. Read this work on your show. We must let the whole world know. Time is short, but there is still a chance to avoid the war of circumstance. Evil is rising. It is already here. Perfect love casts out all fear. No time to think or meditate. Do this now before it's too late. How unoriginal. A 2-year-old could have written that. Lame, lame, dull. The manuscript was face down, so he turned it over. The title emasculated him for a brief moment. The title was burned into the cover. Monsters are real. Abandon all hope. The truth. Written by Alistair Mortimer Kainswright? Didn't write this. That was the moment the nightmare began. He heard light feet running, scampering from the far end of his hallway, coming towards the kitchen, growing louder as they approached. Alistair's vigor weakened even more. A dull throb forced pressure upon his temples, making him lightheaded, almost as if a smothering hand was suffocating him. His nose was smashed, and his lips could not utter a scream. His desperate cries were muted by a moist, enormous, invisible hand, and he was pulled to the tile floor. With his strength exhausted and dried up, as if all resilience had been sucked away by a siphon, Alistair was unable to defend himself or resist. Eventually, this horrifying episode subsided. Alistair had no answer to what he had been put through. His head hurt, his back ached. He was unsteady on his feet for a few minutes. He poured himself a glass of orange juice and sat contemplating the manuscript before him. Where had the footsteps gone? Nothing appeared. Nothing at all. Alistair then thought, monsters are real, abandon all hope. Simpletons, pure and simple, feigning stupidity. With a strong aversion and detestation, he was tempted to toss the manuscript into a fire pit. Although he loathed it, he cannot say conclusively whether the events of the night were real or imagined. In fact, the manuscript did have his name as the author. Curiosity alone compelled him to read it. The manuscript was redolent of an unhallowed age, as dusty as the antediluvian period. As vividly abhorrent as this night had been, he thought himself pretty lucky to be caught up in the unexplained. After all, his podcast promoted this subject matter. He never believed, while working in his studio domicile, that one day something of this magnitude would manifest itself. He was being revealed the actuality of what he was creating from his mind. But he could not shake the sight of his own double. It was entirely too unexplainably freakish. Opening the manuscript, whose pages felt brittle but did not crumble, he found the first entry, a poem without a title. There are creatures that creep and crawl. They are the beast inside us all. They turn and twist our simple minds into animals of every kind. From the darkness in great numbers they come to devour the many, to curse the some. From lofty heights they build their nests, and no man living shall find his rest. And from the earth, from deep underground, they are so ordered by the demonic sound. It rises up slowly to the unaware and in a hush, you find yourself down there. Ugh, rubbish, pure rubbish, Alistair groaned. Chapter 1. Turn to page 13. Short chapter. How very peculiar. Oh, he flipped his pages to page 13. Embedded within the page, within its own secure indentation, was a ring of some sort. The only words on the page in heavy black ink read, "Put the ring on your finger." "I will do no such thing," he protested, and closed the manuscript. The manuscript flew open on its own, phantasmically shuffling the pages rapidly back to page 13. The color of the words on page 13 now had chromatically changed from black to red. "Ludicrous," he denounced, and slid his chair away from the table. He stood at the table, looking down, his back to the window. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was behind him. Unwittingly, he turned his head to see what might be making the sound. To his transfixed horror and surprise, he saw himself in the window, looking in. A cold sweat ate at his chest and clawed his forehead. How could this be? The him that was outside was shouting something indistinguishable. Alistair tried to understand, to read his lips, but he could not interpret what his other self was conveying. Although reeling in tacit horror, he knew there was only one way to get answers. He raced across the kitchen, stormed through the back door, and had every intention of nabbing this look-alike. But his twin was not at the window any longer. It defied all reasonability. How could he have gone so quickly? Even more puzzling was when Alistair, who was now outside, looked in through the window and saw himself standing at the table where he just had stood. That's impossible. Absolutely illogical. No way. His twin was doing something. Alistair craned his neck to see. The twin put the ring on his finger, and in an instant, he was gone, vanished away. Alistair darted back into the kitchen. His twin was gone, but the manuscript remained turned to page 13. But the red letters were no longer red. The letters were charred into the page of the book as it delicately burned into a match. The ring was still lodged in the page. He fought against the temptation, but gave in and removed the ring from the page. He examined it, looked it over, and found an inscription which read, Isaiah 56:9. Every beast of the field come to devour every beast in the forest. Alistair remained mystified. With much hesitation, but compelled by a force too strong to resist, he placed the ring on his finger. As the ring slipped tightly around his finger, he spun around toward the window. His twin was there again. He was smiling and holding up his hand to show Alistair he too had placed the ring on his finger. He became instantly light on his feet, and everything in the kitchen became transparent with a translucent radiance. Seconds later, the house was gone from around him. Everything had disappeared. Unable to make any determination of what had occurred, he considered his ominous situation carefully. His surroundings were as barren and bleak as any, and utterly vast in an ominous desert as any he had ever seen. There was nothing nor no one for as far as the eye could see. The immemorial air was inexplicable at first. He choked, but after a couple of hard swallows, his throat adjusted. His next thought was to remove the ring, and hopefully this would return him home. But no matter how he twisted and tugged on it, the ring was truly stuck. Ah, this is great. He didn't even have his baseball bat. It must have not had the teleportation or whatever it was that just had transpired. But the manuscript lay at his feet. Ah, brilliant. He then turned to page 13, where I should have been, but there was no longer a page 13. Well, shit, this just keeps getting better. One more scan of the colossal, tenorific surroundings proved futile. Carrying the manuscript under his arm, half afraid to read any more, he began to walk in the way his feet were pointed. He figured since he had no compass and there was no sun, moon, or stars, he had 1 in 4 choices. He was going in a direction that was correct. There was no road, no path, no footprints, no signs, not a single tree or landmark. Truthfully, he could walk 100 miles on this flat plateau, might just be walking in circles. Alistair did not want to languish forever in this faceless realm. He estimated he had been walking for close to 30 minutes when in the very far distance he saw a blurb. There was something ahead that resembled a smudge on the landscape, and the smudge appeared to be coming toward him. Without realistic options, he continued his approach. As the two drew closer to one another, Alistair recognized the person. It was that scoundrel that had been in his kitchen. His twin. Alright, now for some answers. The two men mirrored one another. The twin looked behind them and began to run. To Alistair, it looked like a panic run. Alistair then had the presence of mind to take the hint. He glanced over his shoulder, only to see his worst nightmare. Giant, black, hairy-legged spiders were gaining on him. This arachnid cluster had to be in the thousands, and each spider as big as a grown man. The land behind him had turned dark, and the spiders were consistently and uniformly converging to his position. Alistair ran like he had never ran before. All things which wiggle, crawl, scuttle, or jump had joined the spiders in pursuit of Alistair. He looked straight ahead at his twin, who was coming just as hard and fast. Alistair did not see what his twin was running from. He He detected nothing alarming within his field of vision, motivating him to run. Outside of reason and causation, overhead the sky lit up with lightning streaking across the sky in zigzags. Then the lightning strikes began. Alistair felt like a moving target. Because the terrain was so level, neither of the two saw the enormous crevice between them. They made eye contact right before both plunged to the unknown. When Alistair hit the water below, he flailed wildly, not expecting the cold explosion his body felt as it submerged. Miraculously, he bobbed back to the surface and splashed exhaustedly to the shore. But the shore was no place to be. The sands were alive with devilish creatures beneath the surface whose slimy tentacles emerged to wrap their suckers around them. Alistair fought for his life, popping the suction cups loose and staggering into the dense, sweltering vegetation of an unexplored jungle. There was no retreating. He could not begin to determine what hemisphere he was in. For all he knew, he could be anywhere in the world or outside of it. He was immediately accosted by living vines and aerating roots which sprung from the ground in crisscross patterns, over and under in knots, causing treacherous footfalls. His feet were being poked, prodded, groped, and grabbed at. He found it most difficult to battle all the elements, taking high steps and shaking loose his impediments. He wondered what happened to his twin. Did he drown, succumb to the jungle? He could not disregard the feeling of ineptitude. He should have tried to save him. Matter of fact, he never actually saw him fall. He only remembered looking into his own eyes. Where was the manuscript? Damn, he had lost that too. The jungle humidity slowly drained Alistair as he traversed to the unknown. He figured he had been in heat for an hour, and when the most unexpected sight appeared directly of him, it was his